Whoops. Chat. Welcome. Can y'all hear me okay? We good? How's everybody doing today? Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alok Kanoja. I'm a psychiatrist practicing in Boston. Just a reminder that everything we discuss today on stream is intended to be for educational purposes only, and nothing is intended to be taken as medical advice. So if you guys have a concern, question, please go see a licensed professional. Tired, but good. That's good, dude. Hopefully you're tired for a good reason. So, how's everybody doing today? Gotta say the line every time, dude. Gotta remind people that although I'm Dr. K, I'm not your doctor. I'm just a doctor on the internet. So, good. For those of y'all that are finishing class, props to you for going to class. You know, it's tough. For those of you that are feeling lonely and sad, my apologies and condolences. I think, you know, sometimes life is rough. I did get a haircut. So I hope everyone's doing good today. Couple of quick announcements. Oh, we don't need that. Before we get started. Let's move this. Let's just go here. And then let's go ahead and... Yeah, a couple of quick announcements. So one is... so a couple of things. So first is that we probably won't be streaming for the rest of the week. So apologies for that. We're working on another secret project, and hopefully you guys like the secret projects that we've done so far. Another thing that, a couple of other things. So we've got an interesting post today from the parenting subreddit, and we're going to be doing a launch for parent coaching on November 11th, and we've got 100 slots for parents who want to, you know, form a better relationship with their kids, and sort of support parents to support their kids through technology addiction. So we've got a really good post today from the parenting subreddit that we're going to be talking a little bit about that. So we're going to have a couple of like parent-related posts and content, maybe interviews, things like that. So I'd love to hear from y'all as well. Like, so I'm going to share, you know, a case, and we're going to kind of look over it together. And and so if you guys like that kind of thing, like if it's interesting to hear, you know, from a parent's perspective, like how to approach relationships, please let us know. So I know that generally speaking, parents really, really like it when we talk about y'all. So I'm really curious if we can support your relationship with your parents by looking at the parents' perspective, and whether it'll actually be educational to you guys as well. Technology addiction, yes, I did say technology addiction. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Okay. So, and then we're going to try to do some kind of meditation today, but let me see if there's a good... Let me see. I'll try to... I want to definitely try to meditate today, because I think we've been skipping that for a long time. Levitation tutorial, not quite yet. Okay, so yeah, no Austin today. So I think hopefully it got rescheduled. I'm not sure exactly what happened. So we can try to... hopefully we'll do it at some point, but I'm looking forward to it. And if it happens, it happens. Any ADHD meditation tips? Yeah, so maybe we can talk a little bit about ADHD and meditation at the end. Make a note of that. Okay, so should we dive to posts, or y'all want to like vibe for a little bit? What do y'all think? Huh? Oh God, what did I do? There. Vibe? I'm not streaming with Will Neff. Dive in? Okay. Yeah, so how's everybody doing today? React to some content? Yeah, you guys tell me. We're chilling today. How's everybody doing today? What's been going on? So I've been in Romania for the last couple of weeks. Can y'all tell me what's been going on in the world recently? What's been going on Twitch? I haven't been able to keep up with stuff. Meditation is going to be towards the end, unless you guys want to do it now. Big data leak? I think I caught that. Oh yeah, I saw some stuff about this Valkyrian beauty product stuff. So let's try to remember that, let's try to be nice, okay? Like, things get complicated. I mean, so even, yeah, I mean, like, so I sometimes talk about Ayurveda, and some people were critical of that, right? So, like, I think that it's good to be critical of things that you're skeptical of and try to be compassionate towards people, and stuff shouldn't really devolve into hate. Yeah. So I think it's good. Like, I think people should be held to a high standard, especially when it comes to science. So that's good. So hold people to a standard that you think is fair, and don't make it toxic. Right? Yeah, so it seems like drama. Okay. So let's go ahead and talk about mild depression. Sure, what do you want to know about mild depression? I don't know what the William Osman video is. It's a spicy depression. So someone's asking, is CBT good actually? So it can be. So here's my experience with like most psychiatric treatments. For a third of the people that try it, it works really, really well. For a third of people, it works like moderately well, maybe get some benefit, but it's not the best thing. For a third of people, it really doesn't help much. That's been my overall experience with most psychiatric treatments. Medications, a particular kind of therapy, whatever. Oh yeah, okay, so chat is... I don't know if I just got trolled. Someone's asking what types of meditation may help Tourette syndrome. That's a good question. I actually don't know, but I will do some research into it. I actually don't know. I tend to know a lot about the research on meditation, but when it comes to Tourette's, I actually don't know too much about... I haven't read a whole lot of studies on that. It's just Tourette's tends to be regarded as a more neurological condition, right? It's not psychiatric. So, I mean, I've read tons of studies on meditation and depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, addiction, stuff like that. I know a little bit less about Tourette's, but I can look into it. People are asking about seasonal depression. It is that time of the year. So we can talk a little bit about that. So in terms of seasonal depression, for people who don't know, there's something called seasonal affective disorder, which is a kind of depression that hits depending on the season, and it usually happens in the wintertime. So seasonal affective disorder is an affect. So affect is like emotions. So it's an affective disorder. It's a disorder of your emotions that tends to relate to the seasons. And generally speaking, seasonal affective disorder looks like depression. The interesting thing that makes it different from other kinds of depression is that it tends to happen in the wintertime and tends to self-resolve once the winter ends. So I think seasonal affective disorder is a little bit more common in northern climates and appears to be related to some combination of light exposure as well as potentially some degree of hibernation physiology. I don't know too much. I mean, beyond that, I'm not sure. I've read some interesting theories and stuff. But in terms of treatments for seasonal affective disorder, so some people will do things like medication, but actually there have been studies on things called light boxes, which are devices that emit light that is at a particular frequency and appears to have a positive effect on seasonal affective disorder. The other thing to remember is that depression is actually worsened or potentially caused by vitamin D deficiency. So remember that depression is a symptom. It's not necessarily a diagnosis. And depression can be caused by many things. So it can be caused by major depressive disorder. It can be caused by bipolar disorder. It can even be caused by some physiologic things. So thyroid hormone deficiency can cause depression. Vitamin D deficiency can cause depression. So remember that depression has a differential diagnosis, which can be psychiatric in nature, like major depressive disorder or bipolar disorder. It can also be physiologic in nature, like vitamin D deficiency and what was the other one I just said? Oh yeah, thyroid problems. And so if you look at seasonal affective disorder, there may be an overlap between the vitamin D level that's produced, right? So remember that vitamin D is produced by sun exposure. And so actually exposing yourself to a particular frequency of light using a light box may boost your vitamin D levels, and that may be the mechanism through which the light box is effective at reducing seasonal depression. So quick, side note on seasonal depression. I think it's an important question because a lot of people don't realize. So I think one of the biggest problems, with, I don't think it's just gamers, but I think just in general, is like a lot of people. So as there's been a growth of information on the internet, sometimes people like lose track of like really basic things. So like since there's so much available information on, let's say, WebMD or whatever, people will just Google their symptoms and they won't actually go to a doctor, right? So you can try to figure your own stuff out, which is great. The problem is that, if you Google something, like you already have a hypothesis in mind and the only answers you're going to get are going to be related to that hypothesis. Whereas going to see a trained professional, the reason that they're trained is to think about things that may not have occurred to you and investigate those things. So that's why it really is a good idea. I mean, we don't just say it as a legal disclaimer that if you guys have a concern, you should really go see a licensed professional because they may be able to think about all kinds of things that you may not have thought about. That's really it's a huge chunk of the value they bring. So what do I think about people not wanting kids nowadays to not inflict pain? I don't understand that question. So Slim Q is asking, I'm seeing a psychiatrist for the first time tomorrow. Is there anything you can recommend? Yeah, just be honest. Remember, it's not your job to know what to expect or know what to do. That's their job, right? So let them do it. I haven't seen Dune. I haven't seen the Kurt Zagatst thing about an antidote to dissatisfaction, but I'm sure it's good. So someone's asking, could you have an idea what's going on with me? I'm diagnosed with severe depression, but I also tend to get hypomanic episodes, which only last a day or two. That's the kind of specific question that I think is best referred to your clinician. So that's a question that you should absolutely ask to whoever gave you the diagnosis, right? So it sounds like you're pretty knowledgeable with the terminology, but like there's probably a lot of nuance there. I don't know what to make of that without more information. How to get better hair like you, Dr. K. I think that's where I'm lucky, dude. It's genetics, right? So there's a lot of stuff. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff you can do. I mean, I'm not an expert in that though, so I don't really know. You just keep it clean, I suppose, is like number one. Yeah, so I think as Indians, many of us are blessed with good hair, and we also pay the price because we have good hair all over our bodies. So that's the price we pay. Both our men and women are blessed with abundant, copious hair, which is great for if you're a dude, and can be a little bit less good if you're a woman. But that beauty standard is changing, right? So we're as a society, we're changing in terms of what's an acceptable beauty standard and women shaving their legs and stuff like that. So that's cool. I think it'll be hopefully easier for Indian women in the future. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, so some time ago, I don't know if I've told you guys the story before, but So my wife and I have a rule. So I asked her, I was like, because like nowadays beards are in, right? And like mustaches are in. I was like, because a lot of Indian dudes, like especially in India, will grow mustaches. It's like a big part of the culture. And so I one time I asked my wife, I was like, what do you think about me getting a mustache? And she says, like, you can grow whatever you want to. And I was like, great, like what a supportive partner. She's like, but whatever you grow, I'm going to grow. So I'm clean shaven as a result. All right, let's get started. Okay. All right, so we're going to start with this one, okay? So our first post of the day is going to be, how can I better deal with my self-destructive personality? Hey, Dr. K and fellow gamers, I'm curious about what causes individuals to act self-destructively and how one can remedy it. For context, I've had self-destructive tendencies for the larger part of my young adult life, characterized by purposefully sabotaging romantic relationships, going to exams either high or hungover, and distancing myself from my friends. After some self-reflection, I think personally it's about the challenge of being successful despite being self-destructive. After I sabotage my romantic relationships, I'll do everything I can to restore it. Every exam I take not sober, I push myself to do well with just critical thinking and test-taking skills. And after intense distancing from friends, I'll restore those friendships. I've almost come to idolize and become satisfied by destroying parts of my life and then restoring them. So far, despite my self-destructive tendencies, I've continued to be pretty successful both academically, extracurricularly, and with my personal projects. However, with every success I have, I feel like I need to self-destruct more to make it more satisfying to succeed. It almost feels rewarding to be more successful than others, working from a lower peg than others. Unfortunately, although satisfying, lately I felt I'd rather just live a comfortably, consistently productive life. Especially since I think my ADHD, combined with this self-destructive personality, has fueled a little bit of substance abuse and interpersonal relationship issues. Okay. So, let's talk about self-destructive personalities. So the first thing to say is that self-destructive personalities, I don't know, you guys think this dude is built different, just wait. I think this person may be more relatable than y'all realize. So the first thing to understand about self-destructive personalities is that is actually like an umbrella term that encompasses a lot of different things. So usually when we hear cases of people who are self-destructive, they don't, as this person does, describe themselves as being relatively successful, right? So this is a person who does pretty well, is able to get into romantic relationships, is able to do well in school, is able to find friendships. So they're doing really well. And once they start to do well, they sabotage themselves, and then they try to fix it. And then they take a lot of pride and satisfaction out of doing well anyway. So they're like living life with a self-imposed handicap. And that somehow is very exciting to them. And so most people, when I think of who are self-destructive, are kind of not like that. It's not people who are ultimately succeeding in spite of a handicap. It's people who are on the road to success and tend to sabotage things that fall apart. So what's going on with this person? So I like this post because it exemplifies one source of being self-destructive, which is I'd say that this person is essentially a real-life Smurf. And so if you think about smurfing in video games, like what is smurfing, right? I don't know if you guys have ever participated in smurfing. Like I remember I used to do that like in StarCraft, right? So this is like where instead of playing at your level, you go down like a couple of levels and then you handicap yourself because it's more fun. But in the back of your mind, you actually know that you're still going to crush them, right? So like I remember back when I used to play StarCraft, like in order to have fun, because instead of like actually grinding ladder and competing against people that really I should be competing against, it was actually easier for my ego to play against noobs and like restrict myself to an all Firebat army. Okay, so I don't know if you guys ever played StarCraft 1. I don't even think Firebats exist in StarCraft 2. But like you take some stupid unit and you see if you can make it fun because that's kind of more exciting. And we see smurfing like in most video games, right? So you'll see this, like, I'm going to just talk about Dota, for example. So like you'll have smurfs that are like, yeah, I'm going to pick some weird hero and go mid. And I'm going to sort of handicap myself to make it like more interesting. Or I'm going to go mid and I'm going to like first feed a couple of kills and then I'm going to come back and like crush everyone, right? So if we think about what's the mentality behind smurfing, it's like this idea that instead of actually playing at a high level where you have a real chance to lose, people will instead smurf so that they can impose some kind of handicap, which makes things exciting, but is ultimately theirs to control, right? Because as soon as like, what happens when a smurf imposes too much of a handicap? They just handicap themselves less the next game. They just like pick Meepo and they like crush everyone. So it's kind of a very interesting example of like, you know, people who are impose some kind of handicap that isn't really a real handicap. It's like an artificial handicap that you can control so that you give yourself an artificial feeling of challenge, and then like you can still get that artificial feeling of triumph. And we see this a lot in this person's post, right? That they sabotage things, but they don't ever sabotage things to the point where they're unfixable. They just sabotage things to the point where they have to like try extra hard to put things together, right? Like they have to like try to make it, they just sabotage themselves to the point where it's still fixable and they can still make a comeback. And since they appear to be pretty good at the game of life, i.e. they're able to enter romantic relationships, they're able to, you know, do well in school, and they're able to maintain friendships, it's sort of like this weird artificial challenge that they're creating for themselves because, you know, otherwise life playing at that MMR would be boring. And so if we kind of think about this, like, what's the solution to this? And I think actually it's like courage. So the real question is, why do you have to engage with people or in situations where handicapping yourself is necessary for a challenge? What prevents you from actually like naturally rising to the level of your competence, right? Because what we've got here is essentially, I would say, like, it's kind of like an ego sort of thing where like, I'm going to keep things interesting for myself, but at the end of the day, I'm in control. Right? But rising to the level of my competence is actually something that for some reason this person is avoiding. Because what you could assume is that, you know, after you get like, you sabotage your grades so that you have an excuse for like a 3.2, whereas maybe you're a little bit afraid that you won't actually get to like have a 4.0. Maybe you're actually afraid that if you really apply yourself, that you won't be at the top of your class. Or there may be people who, heaven forbid, are like smarter than you, right? There may be people out there who, if you apply yourself 100% and you're left lacking, then that can be like a really devastating realization. And it's the same reason that people smurf, right? It's because like actually playing against people at your level can result in you just straight up losing. So people are afraid to play that game because they don't want to lose. So what they do is create artificially difficult circumstances that will still guarantee winning. So it's kind of weird, but I have seen this before. It's a different kind of self-destructive personality. It's what I would call almost like high-functioning self-destructive personality. These are people who are able to actually succeed in life, but they ultimately handicap themselves. Because here's the thing, if you handicap yourself, you can still succeed. Like, it's sort of guaranteed, right? You have nothing to really worry about. It's almost, and I'm about to say something that's going to come across as judgmental, but it's sort of the coward's way of playing the game, right? Because Smurfs are usually, they're cowards. There are other reasons why people will Smurf and stuff like that, but I think for the most part, if you're kind of living your life in a way that's high-functioning, self-destructive personality, what you need to really think about is like, what are you afraid of, right? And if this person, they sort of say like, I'm interested in being excited by the challenge. They feel more satisfied and they feel gratified that they've like risen above and they've succeeded with a handicap. But it's sort of like, I'm going to play Little League soccer as an adult, and I'm only going to use, 1 foot. I'm going to hop around on 1 foot, right? It's like creating some weird artificial barrier instead of actually like playing where I belong. And usually the reason that people do that is because there's something going on, right? There's some amount of like lack of confidence, or they're concerned about what the outcomes could be, right? So there's something going on where for some reason you're hesitant to play at your level. So if you're someone who's got high-functioning self-destructive personality, I'd ask yourself this question, which is, what am I afraid of playing within my own league? Why am I afraid, or maybe you aren't afraid, but I'd ask, I'd explore whether there's fear of like actually playing at the league that you're at. Because it can be quite devastating, because there's also something going on here with confidence, which is that, when you set up yourself for a handicap and you succeed anyway, there's this idea of confidence, like, see how good I am because I succeeded despite the handicap, and see how much better I am than these other noobs who are still struggling and don't even have the handicap that I have. It's all ego, right? It's not true confidence, it's ego. Remember that confidence and ego are at opposite ends of the spectrum. There's a video about that in Dr. K's guide, which explains a lot about how those things are actually at the very opposites. So this person is living a life that propagates their ego. As you propagate your ego, your actual internal confidence starts to diminish. As your internal confidence diminishes, it's hard to actually play in the league that you belong because you don't have confidence, right? You're not confident that you can win. And since you don't want to play in that league, you decide to stay in lower MMR brackets and beat up on noobs, which is essentially what I hear this person doing. So then the real question is, like, what are you afraid of, right? What would it feel like to not sabotage a relationship? What would it feel like to excel in school and then, like, get into a more competitive grad school? Because this is what's terrifying about doing well in school, is that you're going to rise to the level of your competence, right? Or even in the Peter Principle, rise to the level of incompetence, which is that you're going to excel, and then, like, you'll go to, like, a good college, and then you'll go to an Ivy League grad school, and then you'll go to a top 3 consulting firm. And at some point, you're going to start playing games with people who are better than you. And so if that's truly what you're afraid of, like, that's fair. Just be aware of it to begin with, right? Start to be aware of, like, okay, what is it that I'm afraid of? Because why are you handicapping yourself? Like, what's the advantage? The advantage is it boosts your ego. Because you're like, oh, look at how much better I am than all these noobs, despite the fact that I handicap myself. Well, then, like, you should be playing in a different league. You don't belong here, right? You're just beating up on noobs. So, some people have the high-functioning self-destructive personality. I would say that, once again, a gaming analogy goes a long way here. And this is what I would call a real-life smurf, right? You're smurfing at the game of life. You're playing in an MMR bracket that you don't truly belong in. And so ask yourself the question, what makes it hard for me to actually play at the level that I belong? Questions? Yeah, so what if I'm aware of what I'm afraid of, but still don't know how to deal with it? So that's a good question. So this is where, there are a lot of things you can do. So this is like where self-reflection, introspection are good, right? So you can journal, you can go for walks, sit with those feelings, think about those feelings. That's also a prime thing to work on in coaching. So if you guys are interested in that sort of stuff, sign up for coaching. I think a lot of people in group coaching will work through these things together. So that's also, like, a really good option. But I'd also say you've got to be a little bit careful, because oftentimes you may be actually not even aware of what you're truly afraid of. You may have a false fear in front that kind of masquerades against the true fear, right? And so sometimes our mind will do that, where it gives us an acceptable answer that is negative in nature to protect us from the real problem, like underneath the surface. So be careful about that, because there may be a fear that you're not even aware of. Because once you find that fear, and especially if it's unsolvable, that's what the mind loves more than anything else, is to give you a false answer that is unsolvable, because then that lets you off the hook completely, right? If your mind is like, oh, like, and we see this a lot with people who are, like, into the incel thinking and, like, red pill thinking and black pill thinking and stuff like that. They create a diagnosis which has nothing to work on, right? And that's where maybe incel and red pill is a little bit different. But so, like, you have to be careful, because sometimes the mind will frame things in a particular way that are unsolvable. And if your mind frames things in a way that is unsolvable, then you're off the hook. We also see this in people who are narcissistic, right? Oh, the whole world is against me. How can I change? Like, there's nothing I can do because the whole world is against me. This person cut their ties with me. This person cut their ties with me. This person cut their ties with me. The world is full of places of people that are just unfair to me. And there's nothing I can do about that. It's like the world is just a cruel place, or they're racist, or they're homophobic, or whatever. Because sometimes, I know it's crazy, but sometimes you'll see narcissism within minorities or people who are not heterosexual. And I see this a lot, where they sort of frame problems in a particular way that absolves themselves of all personal responsibility. And so sometimes our mind will create a fault that is unsolvable to protect us from the fault that is solvable and is actually our problem. Right? It's like the best cheat code. It's like, oh yeah, it's ping. Ping is the reason that I suck at this game. It's not my fault. Right? So when you assign the responsibility to the outside world for your situation, it's very liberating. And it's also disempowering, which is fantastic, because then if it's disempowering, you can't do anything about it. Easy. Done. Right? Sometimes it is the ping. Well, yeah, sometimes it's the ping. Right? And just like I mentioned earlier, so you can have minorities that are narcissistic, but they also deal with real racism, right? Let's not forget that. So that's what's so interesting about the brain, is that it comes up with really good answers. It's not false. You just have to be super careful about it, because homophobia is rampant in the world, right? It's like even banned and outlawed, and people are like lynched and stuff all over the world. Racism is rampant all over the world, which is what makes it such a tempting answer to absolve ourselves of personal responsibility, because it happens to be true. So it's really tricky. Mind is really good at that. Narcissists are really good at that. So be careful about the false answers that your mind comes up with. Yeah, so same person say, so being afraid of rejection and being judged by other people might be a smokescreen. There's something more behind it. Yeah, so let me just give you a prime example of being afraid of rejection is a smokescreen too. So being afraid of rejection is about how other people will respond to you, right? And this is beautiful, because this person is saying, so being afraid of rejection and being judged by others, that's something that's out of your control. Like you fell into the trap, friend. Because if what you're afraid of is rejection by other people, that is something that you can't control. Right? What you really could be afraid of is not the rejection of other people. It's actually like it's being rejected by yourself. Because like, what if you're not good enough? Forget about how other people respond. What if how would you feel if you weren't good enough? Forget about everyone else. What would it be like if everyone else, like if you rose to the level of you played in the big leagues, and then you failed and everyone said, good job, bro, we love you anyway. How would you feel on the inside? You'd feel devastated. Right? So be careful. Because if what you're afraid of is being rejected by others, I'm not saying that that's necessarily the case. I'm saying it's a prime example, though. Because maybe you are afraid of being rejected by others, right? Maybe you have something in your history that's made you very concerned about the opinions of others and rejection by other people. And by the way, sensitivity to the rejection of others is also linked to an internal sense of like a lack of confidence. Because when you lack confidence within yourself, the opinions of other people start to determine a lot more how you feel about yourself, right? So don't forget about that either. So there's a lot there. Yeah, so what if I'm not sure I can find the answer on my own, but my fear of being judged keeps me from visiting a psychiatrist? There you go. Right? So it's so sneaky, because if you visit a psychiatrist, maybe what they'll uncover is not that you're even afraid of being rejected by other people. Maybe it's something else, whatever is behind the smokescreen. So your mind is going to manufacture a reason to not go see a psychiatrist. Could be that way, right? I don't actually know. I'd have to sit down and talk to you for 2 hours to really figure out what's going on. But you guys see this pattern of smokescreen. So, I mean, it could just, like I said, it's very fair that it's just actually a sensitivity to rejection, which is because early on in life, you just happened to be rejected by a couple of people, and maybe you had not loving parents or things like that. So it could be all that stuff too. I'm not saying I'm right here. I'm just saying it's a prime example of it illustrates the point that I'm trying to make. It doesn't mean that the point actually applies to you. Does that make sense, chat? You guys get that? I think it's very illustrative of exactly what I'm talking about, but it doesn't necessarily mean that applies to any given person. That's for y'all to really think about and explore, right? So it's great, because if you listen to what the way that the mind is framing the problem, oh, I'm afraid of being rejected by other people. You can't control whether you get rejected by other people, right? So what your mind actually tells you, if I can't control how other people respond to me, the best thing to do, the way to take control of my life, is to never play the game. Don't ever give them the opportunity to reject me. And that is actually 100% rejection protection, is by never playing the game. And this is how we get stuck in life. because we have this strategy of 100% rejection protection. And as a result, we're never going to act. So we stay paralyzed. Right? So you got to be careful about the way that your mind frames problems that will naturally lead you to particular kinds of behaviors, because that's the solution. It's not a bad solution. It's actually the perfect solution. So this is where, there's also a video in Dr. K's guide about protective hopelessness. If you guys haven't seen that video, I highly, highly recommend it. I think it can be very, very helpful there. There's also like exercises and stuff related to that. So for people who want to work on this problem, I definitely check out the depression module and specifically the protective hopelessness video. Yeah, I mean, the fear of being judged can be, it's paralyzing. And that's what it's there for, because it protects you, right? Because if you're afraid of being judged, oh my God, because you can't control their judgment. Obviously, you can't control what someone else thinks. So it gives you a wonderful excuse. It gives you a powerful emotional driver to stay exactly where you are and never make a change in your life, which is why it is both protective and defeating at the same time. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people go down the rejection protection path. I didn't realize that was a thing until I put those two words together, but yeah. Someone's asking, where can I find this talk about protective hopelessness? It's in Dr. K's Guide to Mental Health. I don't know. Did nature not think this is protection, though? It absolutely did. So let's be clear. This is protective, right? You guys get that? Because if you don't ever give yourself the opportunity of getting rejected, you're never going to get rejected. So it's very protective. It's great. It's like the ultimate strategy. So you can't, So here's it's very protective. It is natural. That's why everyone's relating to it. You guys get that? So this is the tricky thing about most of our minds, is that our minds are not designed for happiness. The brain did not evolve for happiness. The brain evolved for survival. And so because the brain evolved for survival, it thinks in a slightly different way. Right? So that's why this is hard. This stuff is not intuitive. In fact, what is intuitive is what keeps us stuck. That's why it takes work and effort to actually go against our natural impulses and actually try to figure out how to be happy. Okay. Let's move on. Okay, this is a good one. This is a good one, chat. Okay. How the hell do I go outside? So, this is the most neat thing I've ever posted, but seriously, I spend all my free time on the internet watching YouTube and playing video games. I don't have any friends that I see in person anymore, and the ones that I have online I stopped talking 2 months ago. I want to meet new people. I keep hearing that the first step is to go out and actually do stuff, but what does that even mean? What even is there to do on my own? Every time I think of going to the beach or the library or the local state park on my own, I cringe because I see myself just awkwardly standing around, not really knowing what to do. I have all these ideas for stuff that I think would be fun to do with friends, but I don't have any friends. And I don't like looking awkward around other people, so I don't want to do them by myself. I feel almost trapped inside my room because of this, even though there's nothing physically preventing me from getting out. And it's really frustrating living life like this on a day-by-day basis. I put a lot of thought into getting a hobby or joining a sport or something, but I've always had a hard time finding something that interests me that isn't on a computer. I also don't want to go into a hobby with the majority of my intentions being to meet people, because then I'll put too much expectation on myself to make friends, and as I've learned the hard way multiple times over, that never goes well. Long story short, I'm at a loss here, not really sure what to do with myself. So how do I make this happen? So this is a fantastic post, and I love how self-aware people are becoming about their challenges, okay? So let's start by sort of summarizing, what this person is kind of doing. So they've struggled, they spend a lot of time on the internet, and they literally don't know how to go outside. They don't know what the first step to going outside is. And as they put it, doing stuff. So I think there are also a couple of other things that I want to highlight. I keep hearing that the first step is to actually go out and actually do stuff. Every time I think about going to the beach, I cringe because I see myself awkwardly standing around. I don't like looking awkward around other people, so I don't want to do them by myself. I feel almost trapped, but there's nothing preventing me. It's really, really frustrating, right? And then they've also understood about like what it's like to go out with expectations of making friends, and so that doesn't seem to work. So we're going to talk a little bit about evolution. So do you guys know what the word vestigial means? Anyone know? So a vestigial limb is something that is like no longer necessary, okay? So in evolution, we evolve things. So for example, snakes actually have I think most snakes actually have legs. So they have these like tiny little legs, which are, I think, primarily used for essentially mating. But they have these tiny little legs, which are like tiny and small. So some people have said that for human beings, the appendix is a vestigial organ. And so the running theory that I like about what the appendix is for is that the appendix is a storage of bacteria. So it's basically like if you look at your intestine is like a loop, right? And it has this little like pocket off to the side, let's say, like there's just a pocket over here that just stores a bunch of bacteria. And why is that important? Or why did that used to be important? So as human beings, when we used to get diarrheal illnesses, our gut would get infected with some kind of bacteria, and we'd flush that bacteria out, and we'd flush all the bacteria out of our system. And so then our GI tract would no longer have much good bacteria. So as we would get healthy again, if we weren't careful, we would populate our GI tract with the wrong kinds of bacteria after an illness. We flushed out all the good bacteria along with all the bad bacteria. It's like we're resetting our GI tract. So we need a place for the good bacteria to survive so that it can repopulate our intestine. And that's what some people hypothesize the appendix to be, which is why the appendix gets infected so much and inflamed so much. So we have appendicitis. People get appendicitis. It's quite common. And what happens is the appendix gets inflamed, and it usually has to be surgically removed. And then doctors were like, okay, like this thing is clearly like it needs to come out. And then they started removing appendices, and then, well, the appendixes maybe. And then what they sort of discovered is that like people seem to be doing fine without it. So it doesn't seem like the appendix actually causes, like losing your appendix doesn't seem to cause any problems. So that's an example of a vestigial organ. Maybe the appendix does do something and I just don't really know about it. I'm not a GI specialist. So a lot of times evolution will sort of have vestigial parts that no longer really serve a function. And I think what's happening right now in society is that going outside is something that used to be so basic and is now actually like not really necessary. I know it sounds kind of weird, but going outside to a certain degree has started to become vestigial. So if we think about like we live in a world where there's grocery delivery, where there's like Amazon like 2-hour delivery, where there's like DoorDash and Uber Eats and there's food delivery. You can socialize on Discord, you can hang out on Twitch, you can work online, you can, so you can have a job online, especially during the pandemic. You can have a community online, you can play video games. By the way, you don't need to go to Toys R Us or Best Buy to buy the video game anymore because you have the internet and you just purchase it on Steam or some other platform and you just download it. So like we have a life now where going outside has started to become vestigial. And so this is what happens is like when we have a life that's changing and what we need to survive and function changes, there's also a lot of judgment with those changes, right? So you see are these articles, like I see these articles where like, essentially the boomer generation is like, oh, kids nowadays don't know how to change a tire. And it's like, yeah, that's because first of all, we don't need to go anywhere. Everything comes to us. And secondly, like the prevalence of like Uber and Lyft makes it so that it's actually cheaper for me to like Uber and Lyft around as opposed to owning a car, right? So like we live in a world now where I don't need to own a car. And if I don't need to own a car, I'm never going to learn how to change a tire. But there's this societal expectation that being able to change a tire makes you like a functional human being. And so then what happens is like the boomers are like, oh, kids nowadays, they don't know how to change tires. They don't know how to like build furniture with their hands and all manner of other skills. Like they don't know, like it's like, I'm sure 150 years ago when people started like buying yogurt in grocery stores, there was a group of people that were like, these noobs don't even churn their own butter anymore. It's like, what the hell? Like these slackers, these kids nowadays, they don't know how to churn their own butter. And it's like, yeah, they don't, like no one knows how to churn butter now. Like when did we stop knowing how to churn butter? When it became useless. Like you don't need to churn butter anymore. You don't need to change a tire. And now we get to a devastating part of our society, which is that you actually don't need to go outside. Now, is it healthy to go outside? Absolutely. Are you going to suffer if you don't go outside? Absolutely. But start by doing away with the shame, right? Because what happens right now is that your inability to go outside is coming with a big sides helping of shame. It's like, I'll order one plate of don't know how to go outside. I'll take a side of shame with it, right? It's like, would you like fries with that? Yeah, I'll take that side of shame. Because society right now shames us for not being able to do things that we think are like normal to do, which in a sense, like, sure, it was normal. It's not like, 10,000 years ago, no one had to worry about going outside because outside is all there was. It's like a non-issue. But going outside, learning how to like read facial expressions, these are things that are starting to become vestigial in our society. Is it good? I don't think so. So this is where I'm going to be a little bit of like a butter churner, right? I'm going to say like, you should know how to churn butter. But let's start by acknowledging that now I want you guys to take a step back. Let's look at it differently. What kind of society, so this person doesn't know how to go outside, right? And we say like, shame on you, like how stupid can you be? But let's just think about this. I don't think we should blame, that's not the right approach. Think about what kind of society must exist where someone can get to the age where this person is and not know how to go outside. Just think about that. What kind of circumstances must exist for this kind of person to be in our society? What kind of circumstances must exist for the term NEET to even be like a thing? It's not just like one person. Like 30 years ago, there were no NEETs. There was just like every now and then there was like a dude who was sort of like a deadbeat, right? That's what you called them. It's not a like societal phenomenon. I saw an article recently in either the Washington Post or Wall Street Journal or something that 59.5% of people going to college are women. Men are 40% of like people going to college now, right? So there's a societal effect that's going on. And so I want y'all to understand that if you're in this situation, like you may feel ashamed and like it sort of makes sense because society may shame you, but just pause for a second and think about what kinds of circumstances must exist for you to evolve into the state that you're in right now. What has to happen in our society where going outside becomes vestigial? It becomes a thing of the past, right? And what has to happen is that you have to be able to get food delivered to your house. You have to be able to entertain yourself at home. You have to be able to work from home. And all of these things exist. And the fact that there's like a global pandemic that's sort of forcing everyone to be at home anyway is like certainly not helping. You guys get that? Right? This is what's happening. So the first thing is cut yourself a break. Because you're not fundamentally messed up if you don't know how to go outside. It's such a basic thing that I would say that so for those of you who feel ashamed of not knowing how to do basic things, okay? I want y'all to understand that like the more basic it is, the less your fault it is. Because if it's something so fundamental and you haven't learned it by now, that's actually societal. It's not personal. Like it's not like anyone out there doesn't know how to speak, right? Like if there's a child out there who does not know how to speak at the age of 10, that's not their fault. You guys get that? It's like, it's due to their upbringing. Like it's like, duh. But when it comes to some of these basic things like going outside, we don't treat it that way. We treat it with shame. Right? We're like, oh, what's wrong with kids nowadays? Like, why are you so stupid? You don't even know how to go outside. No, it's the other way around. The more basic it is, the less likely it is to be your responsibility because no one basically taught you how to go outside or you didn't need to. You never needed to learn, which is why you don't know how to do it. And that's the whole point behind evolution, is evolution teaches you what you need to learn. And there are people who will now, I mean, we've had people who've been like agoraphobic for, decades. But this isn't agoraphobia, it's now generational, it's now societal. So that's the first thing, it's vestigial. So the second thing is like, okay, what do you do about it, right? And so this is what I'd say, if you're having trouble going outside, don't overcomplicate it with like all of these different goals at the same time. Finding hobbies, making friends, things like that. I'd say the first thing that you should do is literally go outside. So I don't know where you live or what your environment is like, but I'd grab a book or grab a Kindle or grab your phone, right? And I do it in that order. So I'd try to like get something that's not technological. And I'd like go to a park, like literally leave your house, like shower, clean, wear some clean clothes, and like literally just go for a walk, like grab your book or grab a book bag, go to a library or something, like go to some public space where it's socially acceptable for you to be alone. And so just sit on a park bench and just read. If it's a park, like make sure it's not a park where there are just kids, right? So that can sometimes be creepy and get you into trouble. But like go to a public space where it's like acceptable to be a lone adult and just hang out by yourself. Okay? I'm serious. It's unfortunate the world we live in, right? It's also like, I also hear stories about people who are like the wrong skin color, like hanging out in a neighborhood where people don't believe they belong and like cops get called and stuff like that. So go to like a place where it's like socially acceptable for you to be by yourself and be like an adult. And just because this person's already saying I'm socially awkward, so let's just acknowledge the world for what it is. Let's not go down the tangent. Let's accept it for what it is and figure out how the hell to get outside. So I'd say grab something to do, or you can even grab like a journal or something. Like grab a notebook if you want to try some journaling, and then like go to a public place and hang out there for half an hour, 45 minutes, and just do whatever activity you brought. Breathe in the fresh air, start to appreciate it, maybe go for a walk around your neighborhood, or like if there's some body of water, like walk along the river, or like go to like a national park or like a public park and go for a stroll with your headphones in and listen to some music or listen to an audiobook. That's literally where it starts. Don't even worry about interaction with anyone else. So start by literally going outside. And so you want something to do, because if you feel socially awkward, you need to have something at the very beginning to alleviate that social awkwardness and do something that you know is socially acceptable. Bonus points if you can actually get lost in the book. So like people are asking about Dune. Like if you guys haven't read Dune, go grab Dune. You know, order it off of Amazon. It'll come to you in a box, so you don't have to go to a bookstore. Or if you want to go like, you know, if you want to go ham, you can go to a bookstore and purchase a book. You can say, hey, I'm looking for a good book to read, right? And that's like second step. So start by literally going outside and either going for a walk or sitting at a park bench and doing some reading or something like that, and then come home. So do that ideally 2 to 3 times a week. And when you're ready, like bump it up a notch. So then like go to a bookstore and ask someone, hey, I'm looking for something to read, because now you've been reading Dune, right? So you're halfway through Dune, you walk into a bookstore and you interact with another human being. Okay? And then you're like, hey, I'm looking for a good book to read. Halfway through Dune, I really love it. Do you have any recommendations? And here's the cool thing. When you go into a store like that and you ask a question like that, the person who works there like absolutely loves it. People who work in bookstores are usually there for a reason. They're possibly overworked and underpaid, just like everyone else in society. But the reason that they do it is because they love books. They love recommending books. They like reading books. Most people, right? I don't know about Dune 2, just personally, but you know, and so like that's what they're there for. Like other human beings, like it's gonna be like a fun part of their day. I can like 99% guarantee you that they'll enjoy it if you come in and you ask for a recommendation. And then you kind of like just interact with another human being. Don't even worry about making friends or things like that. And then the third step is like if you form a relationship with that person, you know, so you like read the book, then you circle back and then you say like, hey, I really enjoy the book. Thank you for making the recommendation. I'm interested in exploring more good books. Or do you know if there are anything like book clubs around here that I can get involved in? So you just ask like this person at the bookstore. You have a little bit of a relationship. You ask for what their name is. You know, you don't show up every day because that's creepy. So like you actually read the book and then you increase the interaction. And then when you go to the book club, it's like, it's about reading, right? It's not even about the social interaction. It's about reading. So I like Dune. I like Dune 2. Like, what are these people reading next? You do the activity at hand. So for people who are concerned about social interaction, here's the main thing I'd say. You focus on the activity, the hobby first, and the social interaction second. Recognize that people aren't there to make friends, and if you don't make friends, like that's not a big deal. You're there to read books. Okay? And so you focus on the activity at hand and you try to enjoy that activity at hand. And this is where the person who made the post sort of pointed out that the more I get caught up about making friends, like the more awkward I become, the more expectations there are, the harder it is. It's very insightful. That's why you don't worry about making friends. Friendship is going to be an organic like happening that once you hang out with people on a regular basis, you will start to make friends. So friendship, making friends usually requires a couple of different things, okay? So here are like Dr. K's rules for making friends. Number one is it requires repeated unplanned interactions, okay? So you have to just run across the same people over and over and over again. That's why it's like easier to make friends in school, because I show up in class and you show up in class and I see you. It's not like we're both there for class. The second thing is not actually common interests. So that's not bizarrely an important part of friendship, in my opinion. The next thing is common cause. So you have to have like a shared goal that you can sort of unite around. So in a class, for example, it's like you the person sitting next to you, you sit in a particular seat. We're creatures of habit. Next to you, the same person sits there every day. You see this person like every day in class and you're like, hey, my name is so-and-so. What's your name? Okay, cool. And then like one day you miss class. And then you're like, hey man, do you have like notes from yesterday? And the dude is like, sure. And then you get the notes and then y'all are like, you're good. Then when a test is coming up, it's like, hey dude, thanks for the notes. I really appreciate it. You want to like get together or study for the test? And the person is like, sure. Or they'll say no. And it's like, no big deal, because it's not about making friends. It's about studying for the test. And if you do that enough times and you sort of show up in places and you focus on the activity, the friendship will come naturally. Right? And so, yeah, this is when people say skip class on purpose. Case in point, right? So this is where a society is, now we have a society where like you can afford to skip class. I went to medical school and all of our lectures were taped or recorded, not taped, because that's, back in the 60s. Our lectures were recorded and uploaded, and you could watch them at home if you wanted to. So I had some students that, like, I had one student who lived in a different state and would commute 4 hours to come to school, like during required things. And then he was like in his different state and just like watching videos, right? So there are people who don't go to class. So now we wonder like, oh, why don't people have social skills? It's because we don't need them anymore. You guys get that? So do away with the shame. Cut yourself a little bit of slack. Recognize that, first of all, if you don't know how to go outside, like that's not a you problem. It's like a you plus society problem, right? Do you have a hand in that? Could you have been a little bit more social when you were 14? Sure. Could you have been a little bit more social when you were 17? Sure. So you do have some agency in that, but it's not like you're just a reject human being. It's just society hasn't needed you to go outside, so you didn't really learn. And then start by like literally going outside, having some solo acceptable activity and going to a neutral place where it's not awkward for you to be there, and just do your thing. Go for a walk with headphones on, like listen to some music, listen to a podcast, and like you can listen to a podcast at home. Like even if you watch YouTube videos, I don't know if you guys do this, but sometimes I'll listen to YouTube. Like I'll just have YouTube on while I'm like driving in the car if I'm like listening to a video essay. You don't even need the visuals. And then interact with someone, and then like maybe like go for an activity, and like you'll get there slowly but surely. Right? When you're going on a walk, like I think the bro nod is something I'm a huge fan of, right? Like you're walking by someone. This is something that I don't do this with women. I do it with men. It's the bro nod, right? You just give them the nod. It's like I see you and I salute you and I respect you. It's like it's my favorite social activity. The bro nod is like my favorite thing to do. Like there's this like old dude, like some like 75-year-old like dude who like we go for a walk at the same time. So the dude is like old and is retired. I'm sure he's like this old. I think he's a Vietnamese guy. He's like an old Vietnamese dude who's like wandering around my neighborhood, and then like I also wander around the neighborhood at like 11 o'clock during the day. So before I stream, I go for a walk to clear my head, and I feel like my best friend in the neighborhood is a 75-year-old Vietnamese man, and we just see each other and we nod to each other every day. That's the extent of our interaction. And I think if I grow something, if I see him, I'll bring him something that I grow from my garden. Because I think he's got a garden too. So we're going to be like gardening bros, and it's going to be like easy. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. I don't think he speaks English, so I don't even think we can really interact much, but we don't need to. We're just going to hang. It's going to be great. Right? Yeah. So that's how you go outside. Cut yourself some slack. If you don't know how to go outside, it's not entirely your fault. Yeah, so the downside is that you're kind of just waiting from friends to happen. Yeah, so like, but that's the thing, right? So that's why, like, I think you should focus on the activity, because then you're not waiting for friends to happen, right? It's like you're just doing your thing, and yeah, like if friends happen, they happen, but that's why you should focus on that, and I think that alleviates it somewhat. Okay? Oh boy. Okay. All right, let's do one or two more. Been going a long time today, chat. I've only done two, and we've been like here for like over an hour. Oh my goodness. Okay. People keep on asking about psychoanalysis, but so psychoanalysis is like, I think it's an evidence-based form of therapy. I don't really know. Like, so I kind of started doing a little bit of analytic training and dropped out pretty quick. So I think it's a very deep field. I think it offers us a lot. And I just don't know whether the outcomes from psychoanalysis justify the resources. That's what I'd say about it. So it's very intensive. So it tends to be really expensive. It's like 4 hours a week, usually now, right? And I don't know that like the effect size of psychoanalysis is superior. Like you can do 1 hour of like psychodynamic therapy, let's say, or 1 hour of CBT a week. And last time I looked at the research, it seemed like they're comparable. So my instinctual response, not being an expert in psychoanalysis or even psychoanalysis research, it's part of the reason that I sort of left the training, is that I felt like it doesn't offer the time investment, and the resource investment doesn't appear to correlate with, like, it costs 4 times as much, but it doesn't seem to do 400% of what therapy does. Yeah, so when people say psychoanalysis is better long-term, so that's definitely the perception. And that's what a lot of people will say. That too, I'm not quite sure about the data for. Because the other problem with psychoanalysis, and it's not like the fault of people like the psychoanalytic researchers, the problem is that it's really hard to get large sample sizes with psychoanalysis. This is part of the reason why CBT is an effective therapy for so many different things. Because CBT is super easy to study. So there's a publication bias where if you have an intervention that's easy to study, it's easier to find good results for it, right? Okay. Alrighty. So let's do the parent one. Okay. Ooh, parent one or cult one? Which one, chat? Parent or cult? We've got a cult question. We've got a parent question. Did I see Tech Teller? Tech, can we do a poll? Okay, I'm seeing more people say parent. Dude, what is this up with this? Okay, more people are saying parent, I think. Poll? Bueller? Okay, vote, chat. Okay, let's do parent one. If we have time, we'll do cult. Okay? Cult one's good too. Oh my goodness. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you all very much. Or thank you, people. I gotta stop using the gender neutral guys to keep up with the times. Okay. So, teenage son, 16M, addicted to video game screams, now has headaches and does nothing. So, backstory. My son, 16, always loved gaming. His older sister bought him a PS4 several years ago as a gift, and he had an iPhone for several years too. Wasn't really a problem until last year before the pandemic started. Then he started missing school because he wasn't feeling well, was hard to wake up, seemed moody. We finally figured out that it was because he wasn't going to bed at a good time, staying up late, playing games, or watching stuff on his phone. Grades started to suffer as a result too. The pandemic hit and he pretty much gave up on school for the rest of the semester, only doing the bare minimum. Summer came and we didn't change things up too much. His mother and I are divorced and he spends part of the week with me. And part of the week with her. In the fall, we decided to keep him home and do homeschooling because of the pandemic. That only lasted a month or so before he fell back on his old habits. I grounded him for from his PS4 and Switch. His iPhone had broken by this point, so he didn't have a cell phone any longer. We'd been working with a therapist for my grandson, so we talked to her about my son. She suggested that he start earning back his privileges, but he had to admit to what caused the loss of privileges and come up with ways to earn them back. He refused. I've shared custody of with my ex-wife. She thought I was too strict and only went along with the grounding from video games. While he is with her, she was still letting him watch TV. And he was the one that was manipulating her into letting him stay home from school for the most part. He missed the most school when he was with her and barely missed when he was with me. After that start of the new year, he claimed he had a headache that never went away. That made it to where he couldn't do any schoolwork at all, so he claims. Took him to doctors and a headache specialist and didn't find anything medically wrong. Started prescribing some meds to try to get rid of the headaches, but nothing has really worked, or so he claims. Mostly still on a messed up sleep schedule, despite us telling him he needed to try to go to bed at a decent time, etc. I just found out that he's been sneaking video games by playing on a Game Boy he had that I forgot about. Because he's been getting away with that, that's why I figured he didn't care to earn back his screen time. Now I also suspect about his headaches, whether he actually has them or if they're as bad as he says they are. He refuses to go to therapy. I mean, right now he pretty much has gotten his way. He does zero schoolwork, watches TV at his mom's, and apparently now has been playing Game Boy when he's over here and just sleeping weird hours. Because of the lying and hiding his habit, or just trying to find another fix, I'm afraid that he'll just find something else to do once I take his Game Boy away. And forcing him to keep his door open, only allowing him to sleep in his room, etc., is that really going to solve anything? Just looking for ideas on how to deal with this. His mom thinks I'm too strict and also suffers from chronic pain herself, so she tends to go easier on him. And as a result, he would just rather stay with her than come over to my place when I'm supposed to have him. I don't know if he's too prideful or ashamed to admit when he's messed up, and that's why he refuses to talk to someone else or even to try to earn his screen privileges back. He also feels he's treated unfairly because his older brother had way more freedom in that we didn't regulate his screen use as much, but he was getting good grades, working a job, and having extracurriculars. I've told my son that he would have the same freedom, but he would have to show me he could be responsible too, and clearly his addictions to screens was affecting the rest of his life. Is it time for even more hard love and more punishment / monitoring? I can monitor him when I'm awake, but all bets are off when I'm in bed or when he's over at his mom's. We've tried to get him to do other things with us, but he refuses for the most part. Okay. What do y'all think about that? So let's start by analyzing the post a little bit, and I'm going to point out some language to y'all, okay? And I think this post is a prime example of like how we try to work at Healthy Gamer. So the first thing is that son has always loved gaming, okay? Wasn't a problem until the pandemic. This is going to be important, right? Wasn't feeling well. We finally figured it out. Okay? So, dad thinks he has an answer. And then grades started to suffer. The pandemic hit. He pretty much gave up on school, only doing the bare minimum. Okay, there's divorced parents. That's an important piece. I grounded him. So dad, once again, dad is like, I'm going to ground you because I figured it out and gaming is the problem. So you're going to punish him, right? So we had been working with a therapist for my grandson. She suggested that he start earning back his privileges, but he had to admit what caused the loss of his privileges. He refused, so doesn't want to do therapy. But there may be a good reason for that. Why are people resistant? So shared custody with ex-wife. This is going to be important. She thought I was too strict. While he was with her, she was letting him watch TV. And he was the one manipulating her. Oh, this is interesting. So son is manipulative. Right? At the start of now son has a headache. Okay? So they couldn't find anything medically wrong. And then the dad uses the word claims, or so he claims, or so he claims, right? Mostly still on a messed up sleep schedule. I just found out that he's been sneaking video games. I'm also suspect about the headaches. I mean, right now he's pretty much gotten his way. So here's the gotten his way. What does that imply to y'all? So he's going to find another fix, right? I'm afraid he'll just do something else, forcing him to keep his door open, right? His mom thinks I'm too strict, so she tends to go easier on him. And now he doesn't even want to come over to dad's. What's dad's understanding of why he doesn't want to come over? Oh, it's because my son can't manipulate me. I'm not going to get manipulated. Heaven forbid that mom actually tries to understand her son. That couldn't be it. Maybe son actually really likes mom's place, not because she lets him manipulate her, but because she has empathy and tries to support him. I don't know if he's too prideful or ashamed to admit when he's messed up. I think that there's a third option here as well. Maybe he hasn't messed up, right? Because when did these problems start? They started during the pandemic. And that's why he refuses to talk to someone. I don't know if he's too prideful or ashamed. So this is the crux of our program. So if you don't know what's going on with your kids, why don't you ask them? Here's a crazy idea. Maybe you should ask them. And that's why he refuses to talk to someone else or even try to earn his screen privileges back. Maybe he refuses to earn his screen privileges back or try to play your game because it's a game that he's not going to win. Right? He also feels he's being treated unfairly. So here's what I'd say. This is a problem where the son is basically doing what the dad taught them to do. That's what's going on here. So dad diagnoses a problem and doesn't really care what anyone else thinks, right? At least we don't see it in the post. We're not hearing a whole lot of dialogue or trying to understand. Dad diagnoses the problem. You're staying up too late. Therefore, this is going to change. Based on what I want to do, I'm just going to implement what I want to happen. So if the grades aren't good, I'm going to ground you. I'm going to take the PS4 and switch away. And so the dad is just going to find some way to do what he thinks. And it's a power struggle. So this isn't a 12-year-old anymore. This is a 16-year-old. 16-year-olds have opinions. They have thoughts. They also have struggles. So what I'm hearing is that, generally speaking, the pandemic has been terrible for most people's mental health. Addictions across the board have gone up. Depression has gone up. Anxiety has gone up. And so it's tough. And yet what's happening is dad is now distrusting, doesn't believe what his son is doing, and they're in war. They're antagonistic. They're fighting against each other. And so they're in a competition where dad is I'm going to take your game away, and kid is I'm going to sneak a game. So the kid is now learning how to. So you guys get that the basic problem here is there's no dialogue. There's no attempt at understanding. There is just, I have my goal and I'm going to move towards it no matter what you do or how you feel. So no matter what happens, if you don't do what I say you're going to do, I'm going to take away your video game. I'm going to increase the monitoring more. I'm going to restrict you more. And so the kid is playing the same game because that's what the kid has been taught. When you have a problem with someone, you don't actually ask them, hey, what's going on here? You don't engage in dialogue. That's why the kid is resistant to therapy, right? Because it's dialogue is not valuable in this relationship. And so the kid is going to do the same thing. So dad is I'm going to find a way to get to where I think this relationship needs to go. That's the overarching approach that dad has. It's not about understanding what's going on with the kid. It's all about, this is what you need. The problem is the sleep schedule. The problem is the video game, so let me take that away. Let me take that away. Let me take that away. Let me fix it. Dad is a fixer. And as dad has fixed more and more things, what's happened? Started out with doing the bare minimum. Now the kid has headaches and can't do any schoolwork. Good job, dad. Did a good job, right? Because the more you're fixing the problem, the worse things are getting. What do you think about that? It's interesting. Fix it more. right? So dad is demonstrating a lot of good stuff. He's posting, he's asking for help. He's like, I don't know if this is actually like going to work. Should I do more tough love? That's good. Dad's making an effort, right? And so when dad teaches you, hey, when you have a problem, you just need to use whatever tools at your disposal to fix it. That's what the kid is doing as well. Maybe the kid is depressed. Maybe the kid is struggling in school. Maybe the problems aren't the video games themselves, but that it's really hard to stay motivated. Maybe a kid has ADHD and he's like potentially failing out of school and it's really hard for him. So he uses the video games to cope. And if you take away the PS4 and you take away the Switch, like, let me explain something to you. If you've taken away your son's PS4 and Switch and they're playing freaking Game Boy in the middle of the night, video game addiction is not the problem. Right? If you're resorting to, like, it's hard to get addicted to a Game Boy. Like, it's really hard to get addicted to Game Boy. Am I wrong there, chat? Like, do you guys get that? That's using gaming as coping. It's not like he's playing some gacha game, right? Which is, like, designed to addict people. That's not what he's playing. It's not like some endless MMO. It's freaking Game Boy. So if your kid is addicted to Game Boy, like, video game addiction is not, I would guess 99% of the time, gaming addiction is not the problem. And so what the kid is going to do is he's going to play the same game that dad is teaching him to play, which is when you believe something, you don't engage with someone, there's no compromise, there's my way or the highway. That's dad's approach. And so the kid is like, okay, if the game that we're playing, this is what you're subconsciously teaching your child, my way or the highway. And the kid is he's going to do the same thing. So I'm going to steal the Game Boy. I'm going to sneak it. I'm not going to engage with you. I'm not going to talk with you. I'm not going to engage with the therapist because what is the background of therapy? Just think about this. The therapist is like, he needs to understand why he's lost his privileges. What the fuck? The therapist isn't even bothering to ask, why are you playing games in the first place? Why do you think the kid isn't going into therapy? It's because the kid doesn't have a voice. It's like therapy is being used as a tool of manipulation and control by the dad. He needs to articulate why he's been a bad boy and we took the games away. Then he'll get them back. Maybe the purpose of therapy is to ask the kid, what's going on, man? Why are you playing the games? Are you struggling? What's it been like being at home? Like, maybe start there. Maybe start by actually engaging with your child and asking them, what's going on with you? It seems like you're struggling. Can I help? Maybe ask your kid, can I help? Instead of, here, let me fix it for you and punish you with a side of punishment. Here's a main course, here's a fix-it burger with a side of punishment. Maybe ask, can I help? What's going on? Try to understand. Because now the kid has figured out the trump card, okay? Psychosomatic illness. So I've seen this so much. So, like, you know, I arguably I specialize in a lot of things, but I'd say, like, at some point 30 or 40% of like the referrals that I got were people with psychosomatic illness. So psychosomatic illness is like one of these things where there's some kind of symptom, and we'll talk about this in a second. There's like some kind of symptom or like illness that like can't be medically explained. So headaches are a good example of this. Brain fog is another good example of this. IBS or irritable bowel syndrome. POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardic syndrome is another good example of this. Various autoimmune conditions. Fibromyalgia, CRPS, complex regional pain syndrome, like eczema, headaches. Like, these are all things that are psychosomatic in nature. And so what happens is when the mind suffers and has no coping mechanism or outlet for that suffering, it manifests in the body, right? There's even like physiologic evidence for this. We'll go, if you guys want to hear about that, we'll talk about that in a second. The mechanism through which these things happen. And so as the parent takes away the coping mechanism, you're taking away the copium and punishing them more, right? Then this conflict between like mom and dad. And then the kid starts getting sick. I've seen this like 1,000 times. And now the kid's got the trump card. The kid doesn't want, it's not about video games. The kid doesn't want to go to school. The kid is afraid that he can't go to school. The kid is maybe in love with someone that doesn't like them back. Maybe he has ADHD and is struggling in school. Maybe he's afraid that they're going to be doomed. Maybe he's afraid that they won't get into good college. And they'll be like judged by everyone around them. Maybe his kid is intimidated because he knows that older brother is a gamer and does extracurriculars and has big shoes to fill. And younger brother knows there's no way I can ever live up to the shadow that my older brother has left. And so he's like, oh, I need an excuse for my poor performance. So now I'm medically unable. I can't do homework anymore. Headache. The kid is going to win this game. This is something that the parents need to understand. The kids are going to win. They're going to win. Because the next thing that parents do is they send them off to wilderness camps, right? It's a combination of fixing and punishment. That's what parents in this situation do. And so it's all about power dynamics. It's not about collaboration or cooperation. It's about, I'm going to force you to do what is best for you because I think it's best for you. And this is where a toxic relationship comes from. Now, the kid doesn't even want to go to dad's place. Dad assumes it's because I don't let him watch TV. Well, what the hell do you expect him to do all day? Maybe it's because mom expresses some degree of empathy. Maybe mom knows what it's like to have chronic pain. Maybe there's a reason why he doesn't want to go to dad's place. Ever consider that? Maybe the reason he goes to mom's place, and this is dad's words, right? He manipulates her. She lets herself be manipulated. Maybe she's empathic. Maybe it's not manipulation. Maybe your kid isn't a sociopath who's claiming all this stuff. It's possible he's actually suffering. So that's the other thing I want y'all to think about. Kid is having headaches, and dad doesn't believe him. You guys get that from the post? Dad doesn't believe him. So how do you think that translates into dad's words? How do you think that translates into dad's tone? How do you think that translates into how the child feels about their dad? What's the relationship there when you go to, specialist after specialist and you do everything that a good dad is supposed to do, but in your heart of hearts, you think your kid is faking it? What does that do to the kid? Right? Whereas mom is yeah, I understand. I have chronic pain. So I know what it's like to go to doctors and get test after test after test and then tell you nothing is wrong. Because I feel it. It's wrong. Now, I'm not trying to crucify dad here, but this is a prime example of what we see in our parenting program. Is parents come in thinking like this. The good news is that parents are willing to change, and it's just about taking a step back and working with your kid. Right? It's about sitting down and asking your kid, what can I do to help? Instead of fixing it, maybe ask them, what can I do to help? How can I understand what you're going through? What's tough about your life? Why are you playing the video game? Why is it so addictive to you? And you can even share your concerns. This is what we advocate for parents. We start by alliance building. So you have to learn how to talk to your kid and understand what's going on in their life. Because you can't conquer video game addiction on your own if your kid is fighting against you. It's never going to work. Right? All that's going to happen, you may squash the video game addiction and it's going to pop up. It's going to be like a game of whack-a-mole where they're going to have other problems. So we see this where kids will start doing things like lighting fires. And they'll do things like start stealing and other kinds of acting out behaviors. They'll get into drugs. There are things like that happen. If you just squash the video game without addressing the underlying causes of the video game, you're in big trouble. Because they'll just manifest, or they'll manifest in a psychosomatic way. All of that negative energy will manifest in some other way. So it starts by understanding your kid and building an alliance with them. And then by all means, set healthy limits, right? So the conversation with your kid is, hey, I understand that, the pandemic has been rough for you. I understand that it's hard. Do you want to go to college? You have to sit down with your kid and ask, do you want to go to college? Okay. What is it how do you think you're doing? And the kid is I'm terrified because I know I'm not going to get into college. And then the right move for dad is you have to ask the kid, okay, I would like to help you if you want to go to college to help you get into college. Do you want my help? Are you afraid that even with my help, you won't be able to make it? I can understand that. Because I don't know if you're going to make it, but I'm willing to try if you want my help. Because the kid is taking the power. You guys get that? Dad is trying to exert power in the relationship, and kid is stealing it right back. Kid is going to win. Your kid is going to win. Any conflict between parent and child, kid is going to win. That's what I've learned having 2 daughters, ages 6 and 4. Right? Even if the parent wins, the parent loses. So you have to support your kid, collaborate with your kid, build an alliance with your kid. And then, because the thing is, I don't know if you guys have had interactions with your parents, but y'all have goals, right? So why do you come here? Why do you come to me? It's because I support you in your goals. I don't tell you you're dumb for feeling a certain way. Or sometimes I do, right? So I called this one guy a real life smurf. Like, that wasn't the nicest thing to say, but like, you say it with compassion, you say it with the goal of help, and the person's asking for help. So as a parent, you have to you support people in what they want to do. And like, this is the cool thing about our program is like, when parents do this, it's amazing. It's like transformative. So we've had we had one kid who, so the kid had confidence problems. So he played a bunch of video games. So we dad learned how to talk to his kid. Dad was like, hey, what do you think about learning jujitsu? Kid is like, yeah, that's dope. When my friends were playing video games, I was studying the blade, right? And so then here's a pro level question. If you guys want pro level question we teach our parents to ask. So you say you want to learn jujitsu. So next week, when we sign you up for jujitsu class and it's time to go, and you tell me that you don't want to go and you change your mind, do you want me to listen to you? So when you tell me you don't want to go next week, because I have a feeling that could happen, I just want to know, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to hold you accountable to what you want now? And do you want me to try to force you to go? Or do you want me to just let it slide if you change your mind? You ask that question 1 week ahead of time. That question is awesome. It's like the most OP question. Because you're asking the child, do I get to control you next week or not? And the child is like, yeah, I want you to force me to go. Right? And then when it comes, then the parent has it and he's like, look, I wouldn't normally force you, but you asked me to do this. So I'm choosing to listen to you from a week ago as opposed to the you from now. And I'm going to force you to go. As best as I can, I'm going to force you. I can't really, I'm not going to pick you up and manhandle you and stick you in the car. But I'm going to force you to go. And then tomorrow morning, I'm going to ask you whether this was the right move or not. So I'm going to ask you tomorrow morning, when next week rolls around, do you want me to force you or do you not want me to force you? And then the kid is like, okay, fine. And the next morning rolls around, and then parent asks the kid, hey, did I do the right thing in forcing you? Or do you want me to not do that anymore? And then kid is like, I'd say honestly, 90% of the time, they're like, force me, you did the right thing. Thank you. Thank you for making me go to jujitsu. And then parent and child high five, they're on the same team, they did it. Parent is like, awesome, right? Let's celebrate. And then suddenly this antagonistic interaction becomes a celebration. And then this is happening in all of their dimensions for a lot of the kids, half the kids anyway, right? I'm telling you guys, this is not fictional. This actually happens. This is what we try to do, right? It's about understanding your kid and supporting your kid. Your kid doesn't need you to fix their problems for them. That's not raising an adult. It's infantilizing a teenager. They don't need you to control them. They need you to support them. Because video game addiction, so people will ask me, so I'm an expert, whatever the hell that means, in video game addiction. So parents will ask me, what do you do with your kids? Do you let them play video games? And I say, yes, I do. Do you let them watch TV? Yes, I do. They're like, what? Then I say, it's my philosophy that it's better to teach a child restraint rather than restriction. So I've seen this a lot in the Indian community where parents will be super strict. No boyfriends, no girlfriends, no drinking, no smoking, no video games. It's math club, mathletes, math competition. Those are all three separate things. I'm not talking about one thing. They enroll their kid in all three. Piano or violin, either are acceptable. No drama, no theater, none of that stuff. You can do space camp. Space camp is acceptable. And no parties. No dresses above the knee, no tattoos, no coloring of the hair. You're going to be a good Indian kid. And then they go to college. 30% of them, maybe 50% of them wind up great. They're totally fine with that. They get 4.0s, they do fantastic. The other 50% fall apart. Drinking, drugs, tattoos, rebellion. Oh my goodness. He's been corrupted by American culture. India is so much better. He's corrupted. Hariyo. Corrupted. It's bad influence. He has that friend. His friend is Mexican. Are bapre? He's hanging out with these boys? That is the problem. It is not because I taught him, let's do a little bit of racism too because we are Indian. It's what we do. It is not my fault. This boy he's hanging out with the wrong crowd. He's doing the drinking and the drugs. Hare bapre. I do not understand why he's not going to the math clubs. It's corrupted. Hariyo. What are we going to do? This should not happen. It is problem with the American values. American culture is bad. Now even my younger son, I'm not going to even let him leave the house. He's going to do homeschool. And no friends that are not Indian. No Mexicans, no even Americans. Chinese is okay. That's okay. It's okay. Because they must do studies. Right? That's the attitude. So teach restraint over restriction. Teach your kids how to regulate themselves. Right? Give them the option and teach them how to restrain themselves. Yes. Problem. So anyway, going back to this case. So I think this is a case that we see time and time again. And what I think it comes down to is parent is trying to control child and child is going to win. They're going to manifest things to get out of school until they've succeeded. And I don't know if you guys remember, the people in our community are this way too. Y'all have been the kid, right? Who has done the physical illness stuff. We see posts about that too, where people manifest weird illnesses. And it's all psychosomatic because the mind and the body are connected. And we know this. We know that, for example, stress worsens heart disease, right? If you guys want to hear about that, we can talk about that in a second. So overall, when it comes to interacting with your parents, and if you're a parent who's watching this, it's all about understanding your kid. It's not, I get that you love your kid, but it's just your kid isn't 14. They're not 12. They're 16. They have thoughts. They have feelings. I don't know what's going on with my kid. So then ask. Instead of assuming, oh, the problem is that they're sleeping too late. Well, maybe the reason they're sleeping too late is something else, right? Things are not so simple. Fixing their sleep schedule is going to be a major part of it. I don't doubt that. Sleep schedule is huge. But it's not going to fix all the psychological problems that cause them to go into gaming. It's just not going to be sufficient. There's a lot more that needs to happen to it. So our approach, at least working with parents, is to start by building an alliance and then helping them set healthy boundaries in sort of the way that I explained to y'all with the jiu-jitsu example. Right? It's about letting the kid know. And there's another thing that we try to teach this is tough. Another thing that we try to teach parents is to let their kids fail. Right? So I don't know, I'll give you guys this. This is very important for parents to learn. You got to learn how to you have to learn how to let your child fail. So I'll give you guys an example. So sometimes with parents who try to set limits around video games, okay? So here's one of my favorite ones. So it's we're going to do accent again, okay? So if you want to play the video game, you must get 3.5 GPA. You have to study every day. And if you don't get 3.5 GPA, I'm going to take the game away. And the kid's okay, dad, cool, whatever. And so then what happens, what happens the next day, right? So let's say you have this conversation on a Sunday. Monday, kid comes home, doesn't study. What does the parent do? Are you studying? Why aren't you studying? You should study. If you don't get 3.5, I'm taking the game away. I told you. I've told you before. You should study. And then the kid's yeah, dad, I'll do it, whatever. Dad's wow. And then 2 hours go by, dad's back. What are you doing? You're still not studying? I've told you. 3.5? I've told you before. And so parents start nagging, right? So suddenly you set this limit on the child where they're responsible for getting a 3.5 GPA. But who's actually taking the responsibility? You're laying the theoretical responsibility on the kid, but you are taking the responsibility as a parent. You're nagging them. Hey, I want you to succeed. Don't fail. I can't let you fail. Even though I said that you can handle it and you said you can handle it, now I'm not going to let you handle it. I'm going to intercede on your behalf. And I've heard this from kids where parents will set limits and the parent will be do you want me to remind you to do your homework? And the kid's no, I can handle my homework myself. I don't need you to stop nagging me, mom. Stop nagging me. It's stop doing it. I'm 16 years old. I'm basically an adult. I can take care of myself. And then the parent takes a step back and then kid gets a D. And what does kid do? Get pissed at the parent. Why didn't you remind me, mom? Oh my God, I forgot. And it's your fault that I forgot. It's your fault. You didn't remind me. You were supposed to remind me. No, I wasn't. right? So this is the problem. If you're going to give your kids the responsibility, give them the responsibility. You got to let them fail. Or don't give them the responsibility. You can't have it halfway. So letting the parents let their kids fail, teaching the parents how to let their kids fail is one of the most important things that we offer. And it's hard. Believe me, it's hard. Because if he gets to C, oh my goodness, he's not going to get to Harvard or Yale. Oh my goodness, his future is destroyed. We will not be able to find a good girl. I want to have Ivy League daughter-in-law. Educated but not too educated. Son must be more educated, right? Right? So you can't let your kid fail because then that has consequences. So then you protect your kid from the consequences. You don't let them damage their own life. And in doing so, you infantilize them. And then you accept responsibility for their situation, even though you don't have the power to control their situation. Suddenly their grades are your fault. But you can't do the studying. Boy, I have no doubt in my mind that there's a handful of Indian parents out there that would take the test for their kids if they could. Right? And then you have a man-child, which is what a lot of Indian men grow up to be because their parents will infantilize them. Oh, are bapre. No, beta. You don't need to learn how to wipe your own ass. Let mommy do it for you. Yes. Mommy needs to get it properly so you don't have dingleberry. Are bapre. My boy. Are bapre. Right? All right. So if parents are watching that, they can Google what. Anyway. Let mommy do it for you. Are beta. All right. All right. So you gotta let your kids fail, right? So like in getting to that process, and this is the cool thing is you don't, oftentimes once they know that you're not there, or what's going to happen is they'll ask you for their help. And it's just like what I was saying earlier about like, let them ask you for your help. So it's like the jujitsu thing where you ask them, hey, do you want me to do this for you? You have to have them ask you for it, right? They have to understand. You can't force your help on them because they're going to reject it anyway. Like the dad is doing everything right in a sense, right? He's like trying to get his kid into therapy. He's like taking away the game. He's like sort of setting a regular sleep schedule. He's doing everything right. But the kid is fighting him every step of the way. So this is what we've learned at HG is like, if your kid is fighting you every step of the way, it's not going to work. It just doesn't work. And the first step is that you and your kid, like, I don't know if you guys get this, but if someone in your life has an addiction, they have to be trying to kick it in order to kick it. You guys get that? Like, you can't make an alcoholic sober from the outside. Like, they have to want to be sober. And even then, it's an uphill battle with all of the support and all of the resources because you're dealing with an addiction. And parents are out there trying to fix these problems for their kids instead of working with their kids because it's just not going to work. Right? And so we try to do this kind of stuff. I don't know if this stuff was relatable to y'all or not, but I mean, this is the big thing. And speaking of which, we were talking about evolution earlier. I think parents have a higher, how can I say this? Our society has evolved where old styles of parenting are insufficient. So my parents never talk to me like the way that we teach, kids, the way that we teach parents to talk to kids. This level of communication has not been necessary in the past. For whatever reason, I'm not quite sure. Maybe it was. I don't know. But it's been my experience that the challenges that kids face now, like for example, the pandemic, with depression getting worse, suicide remaining basically stable, anxiety getting worse, video game addiction rates are climbing through the roof. I think they're close to like 11% of the population now, which is, not 11% of the population, 11% of people under the age of 18. So that's twice as bad as alcoholism. It's like staggering. So stuff is getting worse. And I think parents, unfortunately, like just being a good parent is no longer sufficient. The world that kids are growing up in, case in point with our case with the person who doesn't know how to go outside. There are so many basic things about the world that has changed, and we have to change with it. Parents have to change with it. We as kids have to change with it, right? And so it's challenging. I don't blame them. That's what we try to help them because it's like, it's not their fault. Like parenting maybe used to be easier. I don't even know if it's fair to say that. But the problems that parents used to face were different. Now it's like, you've got to it is, I do think things are more challenging because back in my day, video games were not designed by like psychologists and behavioral economists, right? They were designed by like, I guess, people in Japan who thought that Italian plumbers make good heroes. And then instead of like dragons as enemies, we're going to have a turtle. And I mean, that's who used to design games. And now we have these like billion-dollar corporations that are like, you know, hiring psychologists and behavioral economists and things like that are like designing games so that your kid, like if you look at these iPad things, right? Like kids used to spend like hundreds of dollars on the iPad without their parents even knowing. That's how things are designed. So I do think it's an uphill battle, and I don't blame parents. Like I was kind of harsh on this dad, which is a little bit unfair. It's sort of not the dude's fault, but I think he's kind of screwing up, you know, so have some compassion, but also hold people accountable. But anyway, questions? Oh, Jesus. Time flies. Okay. What do we do as the child? Send your parents to us. Seriously. So I'll tell you guys a funny story. So we had a parent in the program who was watching one of our videos and then, or actually was in our parent coaching. So like I was like on a Zoom call with a group of parents. So in the background, so the parent is sitting on a sofa and they've got a laptop in front of them and, you know, they're using the laptop camera because they're, you know, parents. They don't have like a standalone camera, whatever. And then behind, I see this like 15 or 16-year-old like kid, male, walk by, like he walks behind the parent. And then he like stops and he does a double take. And he's like, "Is that Dr. K?" And then the parent turns around and she's like, "Yeah. Do you know who this is?" And the kid is like, he just like looks and then he like leaves. And so the kid watches us and the parent watches us. And the kid was surprised. He was like, it's cool, I guess. Right? It's like, okay. Neat. So I guess we're doing good. So if you guys, you know, I think this is where like, that's why we're going to try to, how can I say this? So someone's asking, you know, how do I talk to my parents? So you can send them our way. That's why we're letting y'all know that we have this coaching program. For parents. The second thing that you can do is, so I think a lot of parents benefit from watching our content to help them understand you. And so it can be true the other way around as well. So part of the reason we're going to do parent content is for y'all, right? So like, this is where, you know, if you're the child in this situation, like I think a nice thing to say to your parent, I mean, not nice in the sense that it's like nice, like, oh, like your hair looks nice today. Not that kind of nice. I'm like, an effective thing to say to your parent is, "Hey dad, I think that you've repeatedly punished me for things around video gaming, but I think that that video games are actually a symptom of a lot of what I'm dealing with right now. And I think that you've tried, like you have assumptions about what's going on in my life and you operate based on those assumptions, but I don't think you've ever really tried to understand like what my experience of like life is right now. Part of the reason that I want to stay with mom is not because she's like easier on me. It's because she makes an attempt to understand and empathize with my situation." Yeah, so this is where people are saying there's no way they would listen, right? So that's, you know, so this is where you have to understand that like, so if they don't listen, they're not going to listen. It's not that simple. But I think you can work up to that, right? So you can also, if they're not, so like I said with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu example, that's something that parents work up to. You can't open the gate with that, right? So this is where a good place to start as a kid. And it's sad because now we're placing the burden of communication on the kids as opposed to the parents. So here's a good way to talk to your parents if you can't open up with that. "Dad, what do you think is going on with me right now? What's your understanding of what my problem is?" Ask an open-ended question. You know? And then like if they say like, "Oh, your problem is that you're addicted to video games." And then your follow-up is like, "Okay, so you've taken away my PS4, you've taken away my Switch, and you've taken away my Game Boy. And like, do you think that's fixing things or are things worse?" And the parent is like, "Well, I guess they're worse because now you have headaches. Yeah, I don't understand it myself either. Like, it's very bewildering, but I feel like something is going on that we're like missing. And I know you keep on taking away my video games, but I don't think my life is getting better. What do you think? Yeah, so if you guys say, that's disrespect. So, and then if that's what your parent says, then you can say, yeah, okay, so I don't mean to be disrespectful. I just want to understand. So just so I'm clear. So if I disagree with you, is that disrespect? And then if the parent says, yes, that's disrespect, then you can say, okay, so if I have a different perspective, what I'm hearing is that we're not going to be able to talk about it. Is that fair to say? Because if I disagree with you and I try to talk to you about it, that's disrespect and you don't want me to do that. So what I'm hearing you say is that you don't want me to try to communicate with you. Is that correct? And he says yes, and then you can say, okay, fine, I understand. I won't try to communicate with you. And then you walk away. And then I can guarantee you that, so here's the key thing to remember about having conversations with parents. Just because you don't see an effect right away doesn't mean that it doesn't have an effect. Right? Like, because they've never seen that from you before. They don't know how to deal with it. And so you have to give them time and you have to give them space. You're not trying to make them feel guilty. You're just like laying out, you're articulating the communication dynamic that they have laid out. You don't want to fight them. Okay? You don't want to fight them. And it's just like, that's fine. So then like, this is where, if you really, I have had, a lot of kids who have parents that are just really not, you can't communicate with them. And so then it's like, it's hard. It's very hard. And that's why we try to support them and they end up seeing a therapist because you need a therapist to get through this kind of thing. A lot of the stuff, some of the stuff you can handle in coaching, but for some of it, you really need a therapist. But then I think over time, it's just sort of articulating to the parents what's happening. Right? So, and the parents, and then like, let's say in this custody example, if your parent says that's disrespectful, and you can say, yeah, I understand where you're coming from. So what you're saying is that, when someone disagrees with you and you don't hear them out, that's disrespectful. So I completely agree. And so you're saying I'm disrespecting you because I'm like trying to communicate with you, and I totally get that. Part of the reason I want to stay with mom is because she's willing to have a conversation with me. Just say that. And if you want me to obey, that's fine. I'll obey. If you want to understand why I do what I do, like, that's part of it. And so I'll obey you. And then this is also like when you start to say those kinds of things, I know it sounds kind of weird, but like that is going to strengthen you as a person. You will gain Shakti, energy, by acknowledging the truth of things and holding your own like ground. So this is something that I think, the people like Mahatma Gandhi like sort of learned this. There are a lot of problems with a lot of what he said, but I think he sort of learned that there's an immense amount of spiritual strength through ahimsa. Ahimsa is nonviolence. So like Gandhi and MLK kind of did this too. Once again, not a saint in all dimensions, but they sort of learned that like you can have, a nonviolent resistance and gain a lot of like strength and energy through it. And once you sort of realize that your dad is like not on your team and you own that and like you say that, it will be easier for you to actually succeed in other parts of your life. I've seen this pattern once again over and over and over again. You don't actually need your dad's help. If they're going to be unempathic to you, if they're not going to try to help you and they're not going to try to support you, we can understand that boundary. You can respect them, you can obey them, but you don't have to like them. And when you start leaving the house and you GTFO and they like start to panic because you're not communicating with them, like that's their bed and they can lie in it. Right? So that, fine, I'll do it myself is absolutely right. So you guys, like, you need to acknowledge, like, and then in the back of your mind, because psychologically in the back of your mind, like, you want your parents to bail you out. There's a lot of mourning that has to happen here. There's a lot of grief because you can't count on your dad, and that's devastating. But there's immense strength in walking away. Even if you're the not powerful party there, if your dad has all the power in the relationship, you can't take it away from him, so don't. Just acknowledge it and say, like, this is a relationship where you have all the power, so I will obey you. And don't threaten him, because what you're tempted, your ego is going to want to say, I'll obey you until I'm gone, and then you'll be sorry. You'll be sorry because you'll be sorry. Don't tell him that. It's a threat. Forget it. He will be sorry, but you don't need to let him know. He knows. He'll figure it out. As you start to pull away, he'll figure it out. So if they have the power in the relationship, you give them the power, and then you walk away when you're able to. And that's where in your heart of hearts and in your mind, you sit down. We're happy to help you as much as we can. And you start to like work on yourself, right? Because you're going to escape this and you're going to escape him. And you're going to build of your life what you want it to be. And you're going to have to do it on your own, which is devastating and grief-stricken and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying it's easy. But you will do it. You have the strength to do it. All you have to realize is that you can't count on like someone else. And once that thought enters your mind consciously, you don't have to hate him for it. You may hate him for it. It's okay to feel hatred towards him, but you're not going to let it dominate you. That's toxic. You're going to build of your life what you want to in spite of what he does. And once you start to build that life and you pull away from him, he will start to panic. And then you have to decide what you want to do at that point. If you want to punish him, you can punish him. I don't think that's healthy. But you also don't have to change your boundaries, right? You can say, well, I've moved out of the house. Like, my house, my rules. I'm like, okay, so I left. They're like, you never visit for Thanksgiving. And it's like, yeah, why would I? Like, parents are like, oh yeah, dad's like, I haven't seen you for a long time. You always visit your mothers and you don't visit me. And then they'll guilt you. And then your response to that is, why would I visit you? We don't say things like that, right? Because it's hurtful. So you can say, no, seriously, I'm asking the question, why would I visit you? Because I'm your dad. He's like, well, yeah, you're my dad, but you made it very clear a long time ago that you were not interested in communicating with me as an adult. So now I'm an adult. And like, I visit mom because she's demonstrated wanting a relationship with me. You have not. Just say it. Say it simply. So I had a supervisor once who ran into a former patient of theirs. And the patient was like, hey, I haven't seen you in such a long time. I'd love to catch up sometime. You know, can we have coffee or something? The supervisor was like, no, I don't see the point. And then the patient was like, what do you mean you don't see the point? And the supervisor was like, well, I was your doctor and you were ill. And I care about you a lot, but like that relationship is over now. So I don't see the point in catching up. Because we don't have that relationship anymore. I don't have any ill will towards you. I thought that was a little bit rough, but you know, you can just acknowledge things and you can say, well, the dad is like, oh, I'm sorry. And then you can say, well, let me think about that. I'll have to think about whether I want to forgive you. I don't know that you even necessarily did anything wrong. You just made it clear what the rules of the game are, and like we played it. And we're still playing it. You know? You can set boundaries with people and it can be hurtful. But that's sort of like, you know, that's not necessarily on them. So I think it's the sort of thing about the nonviolent resistance is like, yeah, Gandhi like opposed the British and then the British left. And then it's like, game's over. Now India and England have good relationship, which is cool. You know? Yeah. Okay, let's do cult. I think cult one is actually relevant to this. But I feel guilty to walk away. What a great comment to segue to this. Dr. K, I was raised in a cult. How can I overcome my fear of setting boundaries with my very religious family when the consequences may be excessive, including complete ostracism and eviction from my home? Okay. Hey, Dr. K, this is a problem I've been trying to come to terms with and overcome for several years. Here's some background. I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, but no longer believe in it. I'm what ex-JWs call physically in, mentally out, because I still feel compelled to go through the motions to maintain a relationship with my family. This is an extremely controlling and insular religion which requires exclusive devotion to its doctrines for all its baptized members. I got baptized as a child before I ever had a chance to know much at all about the outside world. I wanted to believe my parents, friends, and role models were telling the truth, and I was told by many as a child that I would die at Armageddon if I didn't eventually get baptized. I decided it must be true if they believe it. So as a kid just beginning puberty, I dedicated the rest of my life to the religion in front of 1,000 people and have since been held to that promise of devotion and duty and a high moral standard. A few years later, I already had doubts, but it was too late. I was already in. If I decided to tell anyone how I felt, I'd be deemed an apostate, kicked out of my home, and shunned by my family and friends. My late best friend was ostracized, disfellowshipped, and was unable to speak with any of his family or friends for 6 months, trying to show his best that he was repentant and worthy of friends again. He was reinstated at that point, which was actually pretty short when it comes to disfellowshipping, which usually lasts years. Even so, his social life was completely shattered and he was pretty much a shell of himself. Broken, traumatized, depressed, and guilty. He ended his life shortly thereafter. There's trauma for me around all that because I don't want to end up like him, not to mention the fact that I loved him. He was my best friend for years. I also took part in the shunning as was required and feel partly responsible to this day. Doing that to him changed my perspective completely. It ruined his life and he completely fell apart. All because he lied about drinking a little too much at a party. He was over 21, and the elders deemed him an unrepentant sinner and had him disfellowshipped. I've seen it happen over and over again to so many people I love. The thing is, my parents are victims in this too. They were both traumatized, coerced, and taken advantage of themselves. This religion gave them a sense of security when they had none. If they believed they had a choice, I know they'd never shun me. They'd accept me for who I am, knowing this only makes it harder because I love them so much and I don't want to hurt them, but I know I will. And that's the thing, they don't have a choice. They have been told and truly believe that God will punish, maybe even kill them at Armageddon for being disloyal and breaking the rule of shunning, and that I will ultimately die at Armageddon if I'm not shunned because it's a strategy designed to use emotional distress to bring sinners back to the religion. I love them so much, and I know how much they love me. It just breaks my heart that their beliefs and those holding so much power over them in the cult have put them in such a horrible, horrible position, which is so unnatural for a parent to be in. Now I'm 28 and am currently living at my parents' house. After pandemic layoffs, I was able to save some money through unemployment insurance, and I've been using as an opportunity to meet new people and develop marketable skills. I now have an opportunity to start a job doing something I absolutely love in a couple of weeks, but there's a good chance this will cause quite a bit of conflict between me and my parents because of our differing beliefs. This new job will likely force me to actively distance myself from my family's religion, and I know they're going to confront me because I won't be taking part in required service or meetings. They are compelled by religion to pressure me to stay in. Eventually, I know where this will lead, and I'm terrified. Before long, I may even not have a home. Please help me find the courage within myself to do what I know is right for me. This, to me, is my dharma. This feels like the opportunity I've been waiting for, and I'm not going to put it off for a religion I have no interest in being a part of, now that my beliefs have changed. I know this was long, and thank you for understanding. P.S. I would like to add another reason ostracism is so hard to deal with, because they pressure others to avoid worldly non-JWs. People accept for when it comes to work-related things or preaching. So even though I've been meeting some people here and there, I don't actually know very many people outside my family's religion, and thus ostracism would mean being completely cut off from about every family friend I know, including my brother, sister-in-law, nephew, niece, grandparents, and extended relatives. There are very few people I could reach out to besides my therapist and some extended family out of the state, but that's it. Okay. So let's understand a couple of things. The first is that when people think about, so I'm going to talk a little bit about abusive relationships, okay? So the first surprising thing that I learned about abusive relationships is that most people assume that abusive relationships are propagated out of negative emotion. And there's certainly truth to that, right? So like, if you think about an abusive relationship, what we think the person is feeling is a predominance of like fear and shame. And that's absolutely true. Those things are there and they're very prevalent. But in my experience, the most surprising thing about most abusive relationships is how they're propagated by like feelings of love and loyalty. So if you kind of think about, having an abusive parent and like why you can't set limits with them, it's not because of fear. It's because of guilt, right? It's because of like emotional manipulation around positive emotions. So this is something that's really interesting in Western society, is that we tend to think that some emotions are good and some emotions are bad. Like pride and love are good things, right? And love is what it takes to make a marriage. But let me explain to y'all that love is absolutely what destroys half of marriages, right? It just happens to be love with someone who's not your partner. And so good emotions, so in the East, if you look at the yogic perspective, good emotions and negative emotions are equally good and equally bad, right? The problem is that we don't really view them that way. So the first thing that I want people to understand is that if you're in an abusive relationship, the things that are going to tie you to this relationship are actually the positive emotions just as much as the negative emotions. So let's think about this person and why they're thinking about staying, right? What's their hesitance to leave? They've already decided the religion's not for them. Easy, done. And I wouldn't doubt that there are lots of people in cults who stay out of fear or shame or whatever. But I think there are probably an equal number of people, or maybe even more people, that stay out of the religion out of love, right? So even, for example, like when the Jehovah's Witnesses tell the parents, you have to shun your child, what do you think is the primary emotion that they're using to get parents to shun children? It's not fear or shame, it's actually love. So just think about this for a second. What is the reason behind shunning them? If they don't come to the right way, they'll die in Armageddon, right? It's actually love, because you don't want your child, you have to shun them because you love them. The more you love them, the more you've got to shun them, because you have to bring them back with all of your energy. And it's love, right? It's like they're playing on the love. And if you don't ostracize them, then we're going to, I think oftentimes when it comes to parents and children, the love of the child is like the primary thing that causes parents to react the way that they do. And so the first thing to understand about situations like this, and especially abusive relationships, is that they get propagated out of positive emotions just as much as negative emotions. And if we kind of think about like how the manipulation happens, it's like all manipulating a sense of love, because this person is basically saying, if I leave, my parents will have to shun me and I don't want to hurt them. So what's keeping them stuck? It's love. It's loyalty. So the first thing to kind of think about is that if you're trying to leave an abusive relationship, it's not just about overcoming fear and overcoming shame. Those are definitely big pieces of it. And for some people, they're the majority of it. What tends to get people tripped up is that you have to overcome love too, right? You have to overcome guilt. That's something that people sort of understand. Guilt is sort of a negative emotion that is oftentimes rooted in a positive emotion. It's like, why do I feel guilty? Because I didn't do the right thing. But that in turn depends on your definition of what the right thing is. So you guys get that? So first thing I'd say is that if you're trying to leave this kind of thing, you have to understand that you have to do things that will make you feel like a bad person. Like you don't want to hurt your parents. Therefore, you're not going to leave the religion. You guys get that? So what you actually have to overcome is your ability to hurt your parents. And herein lies the biggest amount of gaslighting that happens in abusive relationships and cults. Because who is actually doing the hurting? So this is what's crazy about emotionally manipulative. So how can I say this? There are some relationships that I've seen with kids, especially with their parents, where the child is held emotionally hostage. And this is what cults do. They hold people emotionally hostage. And what are the chains that keep you hostage? It's love. Because this is kind of bizarre. So the greatest trick that cults ever pull, that also happen in individual relationships, is fooling the person who's leaving into thinking they are responsible for their parents' feelings. Do you guys see what's happening? The cult is saying, the child is saying, if I leave, my parents will be devastated and they'll be forced to shun me. They'll be forced to choose between me and all of their social friends, because if they don't shun me, if they keep a relationship, they're going to get shunned. So if I leave, I will cause my parents this suffering. This is the biggest scam that's ever been pulled by a cult. Because you're not causing their suffering. It's the religion that's causing their suffering. But the religion has actually brainwashed you into thinking that you have this in your control, that if you stay, your parents will be okay. They put that responsibility on you, and they sort of kind of give you this idea that your parents' well-being is due to your behavior. This is how they tangle everyone in, right? Because the cult's not responsible. They're not the one, like, just think about that. Like, if your parents why can't your parents maintain a relationship with you if you leave? It's because the cult isn't letting them, right? The Jehovah's Witness isn't letting them. You actually have no responsibility over that. The real toxicity is coming from the cult. And this is what's so crazy about this level of brainwashing. We see it in individual relationships, especially with like narcissistic parents, where kids will fool themselves or be brainwashed into thinking that the emotional well-being of the parent is their responsibility, right? And we'll sometimes even see this too. Like, so I remember I had a case where, there was two kids that were traumatized. So one of them was my patient. And then, the parent would be like, if you don't clean up, I'm going to get angry. And when I get angry, I'm going to hit your sibling. And when I hit them, it's going to be your fault, right? This is the kind of crap that kids get brainwashed with. When the parent misbehaves, it's your fault. We see this in all kinds of gaslighting where we'll see this in unfaithful partners. Yeah, the reason I cheated on you is because you work so much and I was lonely and you weren't there for me. Therefore, my cheating is your fault. It's your fault that you weren't around. So we do this. This happens a lot with emotionally manipulative people, is they place the responsibility of their behavior on the person. And in doing so, they're holding them emotionally hostage. Even with earlier when we're talking about visiting your parents for Christmas. Oh, if you don't visit for Christmas, I will be sad. And then the kid feels guilty and they're like, oh, I shouldn't make my parents sad. Right? They're not accepting responsibility at all for why doesn't the kid should want to visit for Christmas? What the hell? Just think for a second about why they don't want, that's what kind of situation have you created that forces your child into a particular kind of behavior that causes them to suffer to give you emotional benefit? Same thing is happening with the cult. Because somehow this person has been tricked into thinking that their parents' health or well-being is in their control. If I stay in the religion, my parents will be happy. If I leave the religion, my parents will be sad. Therefore, their happiness or sadness falls to my actions. And once their happiness or sadness falls to my actions, then I'm emotionally held hostage, and I'm trapped in the cult out of nothing to do with fear or shame. It's out of love. But this is what you really have to understand, is that it's not, their happiness or sadness is not yours to control. Right? And this is where you kind of think about it a little bit from a karmic perspective or like an Eastern perspective, which is like, it's your job to take your actions, and your actions may have outcomes, but what your parents choose to do is on them. Right? So if they choose to sever themselves from you for their religious belief and they suffer because of that, that's a choice they're making. And you think that they're going to make a particular choice, you'd also be surprised. So I've heard this a surprising amount where people will leave the cult, and sometimes leaving the cult will bring people with you. That's why cults are so scared about people leaving. Because once one sheep, breaks from the pack, it's other sheep are like, hey, what the hell's going on here? So I had a recent case, maybe about a year or two ago, someone leaving, and then what they were surprised by is that their parents, their dad, actually was honestly, I haven't believed in this stuff for a long time either. I just did this stuff because I thought it was there were some good things to it, but I haven't said anything to you. So it turns out that dad wanted to leave too. And then daughter left, dad left, mom left, and everybody left. Doesn't happen often because there is brainwashing going on. So in terms of what should you do if you're in this situation, remember that your dharma is to live your life. Should you try to take care of other people? Absolutely. Your dharma is to take care of your parents. But don't accept responsibility for things that are not yours to control. So your parents also have to, you can't accept responsibility for your parents' actions or feelings. You can only accept responsibility for your actions. So you have to decide what's more important to me. Escaping the cult and thinking about also thinking about the karma. It's not your karma. Your karma was to be born into this situation. Your karma was to be born into this situation. And a lot of people think that karma means destiny. It doesn't mean destiny. understand that every day you live, you have the opportunity to sow seeds of new karma. So you have a choice right now. If you leave Jehovah's Witness, there's a decent chance you'll, meet someone one day, maybe get married, maybe have kids. And then what kind of karma are you creating for your kids? What kind of circumstance are you going to create for your children down the line if you leave the cult? Versus if you stay in the cult for the sake of alleviating your parents' distress, what kind of karma are you sowing for the next generation? Right? So your duty is by all means to yourself. I think you have a duty to your parents as well. But your duty to your parents does not include, how can I say this? It can't include the decisions that they themselves make. And I see this a lot. This is really challenging also like in addictions. So we'll see this with family members of people with addictions, where the family member, like the person has the addiction and the family member will try so hard, oftentimes parents, to help their kid with the addiction. They'll mortgage their household, send them to rehab and things like that. And since they love their child so much, and then kid says, screw you, relapses, pieces out for a while. And then kid comes crawling back 6 months later and is like, hey, I found rehab. It's $40,000 for a month. Mom, can you take out a second mortgage on the house? And then the mom is like, sure, because you love your child, right? And so you do your duty and you try to help them. And then you can try to help people as much as you want to, but at some point you've got to realize that they themselves have to take responsibility for their situation. You're not putting them in this situation. The religion is putting them in this situation. They are putting themselves in this situation. They've already put themselves in this situation. So you have to be very careful, whether you're in a cult or in an abusive relationship, about who is actually responsible for the situation that everyone is in. And all you can do is take the actions that you think are right. And so take strength, because dharma is all about doing the thing that is difficult. It's not about what's easy. And so I think this is a good example of doing dharma is sometimes doing things that go against your positive emotions because it is your duty. So I'll give you guys an example. So there's a story, there's this Indian epic called the Mahabharata. And in the Mahabharata, there's this guy named Krishna, and Krishna is supposed to be an incarnation of God. So he's an incarnation of the god Vishnu. So he's all powerful. Thing is, when he incarnates, he's kind of OP, but not everyone realizes it. So not many people know he's God. So this one of his cousins or something has a kid, and the kid is born with 6 arms, I think. And so there's this, they call an astrologer, and the astrologer is they're trying to figure out what's going on with this kid. And the astrologer says, whoever picks up someone is going to pick up your child. And when they pick him up, 4 of the arms will fall off. And that person will be responsible for, the death of your child. So the person who gets rid of the arms is going to be responsible for their death. And so the mom is handing the kid to all kinds of people. And one day Krishna is visiting, and it's kind of weird. It's a weird story. There are lots of weird stories. They're also nested. So there's a lot of related stuff. So there's a past karma and things like that to this person. So then one day she hands her son to Krishna, and lo and behold, 4 of the arms fall off. And then mom starts freaking out because mom realizes, oh shit, this is Krishna. If Krishna is his enemy, my son is screwed. There's no way, because he's an incarnation of God. And she's like, Krishna, promise me that you'll never do anything to hurt my kid. And he's like, well, what do you mean? Why do you think I would hurt your kid? I won't hurt, your kid's great. I don't have no peace. And he's like, no, promise me you won't hurt my kid. Promise me you won't hurt my kid. And Krishna says, I swear that if your child insults me even 100 times in a single day, I won't touch a hair on his head. Okay? So mom is like, whew, easy. Okay, he swore this. He's a man of his word. And so he's totally fine. So years go by. Turns out that the kid his name is Shishupal. And he's a complete ass. Okay? And so then many years later, he's grown up, and he visits a court. He visits the court of one of a different king, Yudhishthir. And he goes into the court, and Krishna's a cowherd. So he's sort of noble, but he's he grew up in a village. So he's actually a cowherd. So he wears simpler clothing and things like that. Plays the flute and stuff. So he goes to the court, and he sees that in the court, there's the king, and in a place of honor is Krishna is sitting. And there are a lot of more powerful kings that are sitting lower down the table from him. So Shishupal he's like, what the hell is this? This guy's a cowherd, and there are lots of kings who are more prestigious than this guy? And like, why is he being given a seat of honor? Right? And because Shishupal's been like tolerated, because Krishna has been tolerating his crap. And so he goes on insulting Krishna. And when he starts insulting Krishna, people get pissed because Krishna's in a place of, respectable seating for a reason. It's because a lot of people respect him. And so some of his nephews are like, dude, if you don't shut the fuck up, I'm gonna like take you outside and teach you a lesson. And Krishna's like, no, like let him talk. Like, don't intervene. Let him talk. And so Shishupal gets riled up. And so Krishna has the option to, not let anyone defend him. And so Shishupal goes on insulting him 51 times, 52 times, 60 times, 70 times. Everyone's like getting super, super pissed. How disrespectful is this guy? Krishna's sitting there, and with each insult, he starts to smile more and more and more. And he's like, no, go ahead. Let him speak his piece. Say more. Keep going, Shishupal. Keep going. Keep going. Say whatever's on your chest. If you think I deserve disrespect. And all of Krishna's friends are like, bro, like, what is going on? So he insults him 101st time. And then Krishna takes out, he's got this thing called the Sudarshan Chakra, which is like a spinning disc, lops off Shishupal's head. GG. The 101st insult. So this is the key thing, right? You can't control what your karma places you in, but you have to do your dharma in a particular place, right? So in your situation, sometimes, like, you can't control what your parents' situation is. You just have to act for yourself. And this is where, when they shun you, the most you can do is say, like, look, this is a situation. If you guys want to shun me, that's totally fine. You can even say, I forgive you for shunning me. This religion isn't right for me. And I think that any religion that forcibly separates their parents from their children is not a religion that I want to be a part of. And at the same time, I understand that this is like a big part of your life, and I don't blame you for doing it, and I forgive you. That's totally fine. Like, I forgive you for this. I don't believe in holding grudges. I don't believe in shunning people. I think it was wrong. What happened with my friend was wrong, and like, I'm going to do this job. I'm not going to go to the required services, and if we have to distance ourselves, we have to distance ourselves. I love you guys. If I'm never allowed to talk to you again, I love you from the bottom of my heart. I'm going to try to go live a happy, healthy life, and I wish the same of y'all. I'm going to miss all of you guys, but if I have to go, I have to go. I understand that. I'm not going to blame you for that. And then you do what is dharmically correct. And even though it's going to hurt to say that, you may never see your parents again. So that's absolutely going to hurt. I'm glad you have a therapist. You're going to talk through all that stuff. You're going to go to this job of your dreams. And then the cool thing is, you say, the only people I know are some family a few states over. No, but you're going to learn, you're going to meet a ton of people. Right? You're going to go to this new job and you're going to learn how to make friends. And the problem, one of the karmic problems with life is that you don't get to choose your family, which is why it's so great that you can, to a certain degree, choose your friends. So you're 26 or 27 years old and it feels like a long time, but you have 40, 50 years to go. And you can cultivate relationships with the kind of people that you want. Is it going to be traumatic? Absolutely. Is it going to be difficult? Absolutely. Is it going to be devastating? Absolutely. But generally speaking, transplants are, right? So the last thing I'll leave y'all with is just something from medicine. Because what this person needs, if you're part of a cult, essentially what you need to do is a life transplant. So like, if you think about what a transplant is, like a kidney transplant, what we're literally doing is there's a part of a whole organism, right? So you're part of this whole organism, and we cut you out of that. And you leave everything that you've ever known, everything that you've grown up with. And we can actually move you into another human being. And you can actually live there and start to function there. It requires a lot of adjustment, right? We have to give you some medication to prevent like, host rejection and all that kind of stuff. But we're able to do this. So in your life, you just have to understand that it's going to be a transplant. You're going to come out of everything that you've always known and been comfortable with. That's going to feel like your body, right? It's not just family and friends. It's your entire life. And you're going to be alone for a time, and then you're going to find a new place to go. And it's going to be a bumpy ride, don't get me wrong. But chances are it'll be the right one. Because I think what we know from, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses is that most of them tend to be pretty happy about leaving. So transplants can absolutely be difficult and traumatic, and can also be absolutely life-saving. So if what you need is a life transplant, do it. Right? And get the support that you need. Make sure that if your parents are never going to talk to you again, that you forgive them if you can, that you don't blame them, and you can say, like, I've learned some things from the religion, That's like acceptance and forgiveness. I don't know if Jehovah's Witnesses teach that kind of stuff. I thought they sort of did, but maybe not. I don't know. So be careful about emotional manipulation. Be careful about your positive feelings, and be careful about being held emotionally hostage. Be careful about situations where you feel responsible for circumstances that were never yours to control to begin with, because that's how it works. They make you feel responsible. Oh my God, I'm going to hurt my parents. No, your parents had a choice a long time ago. It sounds like they joined Jehovah's Witnesses and it helped them a lot. And so they have a choice today. It's not your job to take away that choice from them. It's your dharma to make the choice for yourself and let them make the choice for themselves, right? They have to choose what's more important to them, their religion or their child. And they're allowed to make that choice. And when they make it, it's going to hurt like hell, because chances are they won't choose you, but you may be surprised. Life is very long, right? 5 years from now, 10 years from now, maybe they'll run into you. Maybe you send them a letter every now and then. They can choose to burn it or not see it or whatever. You'll tell them, hey, you've got grandkids. Here's pictures. Miss you guys. You never know. So be careful about, making decisions today and like assuming that it's going to be for a lifetime, because the world is changing very rapidly, right? 10, 15 years ago, we didn't even have smartphones, and now there's a global pandemic, and now there are massive changes to the way the world is working. 100 years ago, no one could have fathomed that someone would have difficulty going outside. So the world is changing very rapidly, and I think the most you can do is make the right kind of decision for yourself. And good luck to you. So here's a question. So if I'm leaving home for college and my parents get sad because of that, that's not my responsibility. So let me ask y'all a basic question. Yeah, we're going to meditate today. Let me ask y'all a basic question, okay? Whose responsibility is someone else's feelings? And who is responsible for your feelings? So it's kind of interesting, right? So I'm going to leave y'all with that question. So this is something that's happening a lot nowadays, which is that, I think there's a subtle dividing line between what we do and how it affects people. So I'll give you guys just a simple example. So, let's say that I'm dating someone and I get them a pumpkin cheesecake for their birthday. And it turns out that they're devastated and they start crying when I give them a pumpkin cheesecake. And then I'm really confused, and then they feel terrible, and then I ask, what happened? And they're like, well, I had a twin who was allergic to pumpkins. And the day they died, they ate a pumpkin cheesecake. And so by giving them a pumpkin cheesecake, I have created all this negative feeling for them. So who's responsible for that, right? So sometimes I can feel guilty because I gave them a pumpkin cheesecake. Sometimes they can blame me. They're like, you're an asshole for giving me a pumpkin cheesecake. My actions have created a negative emotion, right? And so who's responsible for that? Let's say the flip end of the spectrum, hate speech, right? So if I engage in hate speech, that is also an action that I'm taking that makes someone feel really bad and they start crying, or bullying, let's say. So who's responsible for that? So I think it's really tricky because the world is definitely moving in the direction of, if I feel a particular way, it is your fault, right? That's the direction that the world is going in. And I think it's dangerous because what we're doing is we're actually outsourcing the control of our feelings to other people. That's a dangerous game, right? So I personally like the yogic view, which is that I take actions and I should be held responsible for my actions, right? So I should speak from a purpose of ahimsa, nonviolence. So in the yogic view, hate speech is wrong because the intention is to hurt another person. And at the same time, it is my responsibility to manage the feelings that I have on the inside. And this is kind of interesting because even as I've worked with people who have suffered from things like, like transphobia, homophobia, racism, things like that, as I've lived myself with those problems, what I sort of discovered is that I can't control what they say, but it is to a certain degree within my control how I manage my feelings. So this is where someone can insult me and they can damage me and they can hurt me, but there's also a certain layer of emotional independence that I'm allowed to have. So I get to take control of my emotions. That's something that I'm not willing to give up to someone else. Another good example of someone who illustrated this principle really, really well is Viktor Frankl. So in Man's Search of Meaning, Viktor Frankl was in the concentration camps during the Holocaust. And he sort of discovered that there's an internal independence. Marcus Aurelius is another example of someone who did this. And so I think that's kind of where Stoicism comes from, right? So I think these are kind of situations where when you kind of say are you responsible for your parents being sad? In a sense, yes, because you are leaving, right? But I also think that sadness is their responsibility. And also that and this kind of goes back to earlier what I was saying about the yogic point of view where good and negative emotions are the same. Sadness can be good and happiness can be bad. It's kind of bizarre, but generally speaking, I think that that's true. We can get a lot of benefit from sadness. We can get a lot of benefit from fear and shame. I think if we didn't get any benefit from it, we wouldn't have evolved to have those emotions. And we don't feel happy permanently. We don't feel joy permanently, right? And in fact, when we feel pride permanently, what do we call that? That sometimes gets called narcissism. So is it your responsibility to not make your parents sad? I mean, you can do that if you want to, but something tells me that if you stayed home from college, they'd be sad anyway, right? What are you going to do? Stay home for the rest of your life? How are they going to feel when you're 40? Are you going to feel pride, happy? You just stayed at home your entire life? So you can only control your actions. You can't really control how your actions affect other people. I know it sounds kind of weird. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't consider how they're going to affect other people, but, it's kind of a bizarre situation. So if you look at some people enjoy, being, I don't even know, if you look at, we had a talk about BDSM the other day. So when you think about, sexuality, you don't think about pain as a part of that, but that's what some people like. Right? So different people like different things, and all you have to do, you can only do what you believe to be right. And I think as long as you're, what are you operating from? Are you operating from a place of ahimsa, of nonviolence? Or are you operating from a place of you operating from a place of hatred, or are you operating from a place of love? And sometimes you can do things that are loving that are also will upset people. So sometimes I try to teach, I was saying, restraint over restriction. Sometimes I have to set limits with my kids and they become sad. But I do that, and I don't want to make them sad, but I still think it's important to be a good parent and teach them how to brush their teeth every day, because I think that's something that will help them in the long term. So it's tough. So I think that's where, when you say what's your responsibility if you're going to college, I'd say your responsibility is if they're going to miss you, that you should try to call and text or video call them as often as possible, right? You can do that. You can say, hey, I miss you guys too. I'm having a great time at college. I'm learning a lot. And you can also study really hard because you are causing your parents some degree of sadness. So you can make their pain worth its while by you excelling when you guys are suffering for this, right? So this is something that I understand very well because I was gone for 3 weeks and it made my kids sad. So that's where I have to make it worth, I inflicted sadness on my children by going to TI. And so they missed me for a long time and that's sad. So I'm going to do my level best to make sure that that was worth the time. You make it worth it. Okay. If you don't miss them, then you can say, I'm sorry you guys missed me. I'm having a fantastic time and I'm really happy to be here. It's I'm excited. I think you can tell them that you're having a positive experience. I think parents will actually be okay with that. Hopefully. So when my children do something that makes me sad, I just want to know that it's worth it. right? When I do something that makes other people sad, I want to know that it's worth it. I think sadness is fine. Sacrifice is fine. Just make it worth it. You know? Okay, what do y'all want to do for meditation? Let me think. What are the themes from today? How to stop smurfing. Okay, let's do this. Let me think. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to teach you guys Manipura mantra meditation. So I think a lot of the themes today have been around emotional processing and digestion. So I've been doing a little bit of research about how to process emotions through meditation. So what I'm going to share with y'all today is not really it's not really like scientific. So I haven't seen really any studies that suggest that, you know, what I'm about to teach y'all is like actually effective. And at the same time, I think I've had a lot of good personal experiences with chakra meditation. I've taught it to patients and things like that feel like it helps. So what we're going to do today is Manipura Chakra mantra meditation. So let me explain a couple of things. So the Manipura chakra is your navel chakra, and this is the chakra, whatever, of your energetic system, your spiritual energetic system that governs digestion. So when I think about emotional problems, I think about digestive blocks for emotions. So if you think about a process of like psychotherapy, what tends to happen is people will have some kind of blockage of emotion. And when you do therapy with someone, they'll have like a breakthrough in therapy that tends to come with an uprushing of emotion. And then you kind of like process it, whatever that means. And then like people feel better afterwards. So even though the process of psychotherapy involves experiencing oftentimes a lot of negative emotions, people will describe the process as feeling lighter, freer, you know, they feel healthier afterward, even though it's like a lot of negative emotion. Somehow it's therapeutic. Another good example of this is funerals. So like if you look at the process of a funeral, what happens is we basically all get together and we experience a lot of sense of like loss and sadness and grief. And then after the funeral, people start to like feel better, right? Some people kind of stay stuck, but generally speaking, funerals are like part of the reason we have them is because they help us process those negative emotions. So our digestion capability, it comes from the Manipura chakra. So this involves physical digestion as well as emotional digestion. So when I'm trying to help people digest their emotions, and so I think a big part of this, if we're thinking about if you're being held emotionally hostage, digesting that emotion should in theory help you be freer from like whatever it's chaining you to, right? Does that make sense? So like that emotional energy is what's holding you back. So I think a lot of things that we talked about today in terms of being able to go outside, you know, being held back by like being an emotional hostage, you know, being stuck addicted to video games or technology, like there's all kinds of emotions that we don't know how to get rid of. So hopefully this technique will help. Okay. So we're going to start by sitting up straight. So I want your spine to be straight. And what we're going to start with is navel breathing, okay? Or belly breathing or abdominal breathing. So sit up straight. And then what I want y'all to do is close your eyes. Take a moment to notice your breath. Just slow, deep breaths. So what we're going to do today is as we breathe, we're going to expand our abdomen and contract our abdomen. And after we do that, we're going to add a second layer of observing the breath travel from our nose all the way through our chest and almost into our abdomen. We exhale, we're going to feel that pressure and that heat sort of coming out of the abdomen. And then for the third phase of the practice, after each, as we're on a full breath, we will use the mantra Ram. So just repeat in your mind or say it out. Yeah, repeat in your mind. Or as you exhale, you can say Ram. So we'll use that mantra. Okay, so for the first phase, what I want you to do is we're going to do about 5 breaths. So as you breathe in, expand your abdomen, push your belly out. And as you exhale, contract the abdomen. Breathe in. And as you exhale, contract the abdomen. Breathe in. And exhale. Breath number 4, breathe in. And exhale and contract. And breath number 5, breathe in. Exhale and contract. And now for the next phase, you can go ahead and continue breathing at a rate that's comfortable. For the next phase, as you breathe in, I want you to imagine the cool air entering your nose and follow that sensation of coolness all the way through your chest, into your abdomen, and even to the point of your navel. So breathe in. Feel that air coming in and going all the way from your nose to your navel, and then exhale. And feel that heat leaving. So breathe in again and follow almost a channel of energy from your nose all the way to your navel. And exhale, and the reverse flow of warmth. Breathe in. Follow the breath down to the navel and exhale. Let the heat rise up and out of you. It may help to breathe in very slowly to really follow that channel of air. So very slow breath next. And out, very slow. Another slow breath in. And out. Now we'll begin the third phase of the practice. There are 2 options for this phase. We'll kind of do either one, or we'll do both. So now we're going to continue with the breath. But as you exhale, I want you to listen to the sound of the exhalation and hear the Ram as your breath leaves your body. So breathe in. And then as you exhale, hear the sound of Ram in your exhalation. Inhale again. And exhale. Do 2 more rounds at your own pace. Breathing in slowly and exhaling slowly, following the breath to your navel and listening for the sound of Ram. And now the second option, if that was difficult for you, is to breathe in. And as you exhale, repeat in your mind, Ram, Ram. Breathe in. And repeat in your mind, Ram. And now try it out loud with me. Take a deep breath in, feel the navel expand. And instead of exhaling, just chant Ram. 2 more rounds. Deep breath in. And feel that vibration in your abdomen. Last round. Slow, deep breath. And now in this space, notice the freeing from emotion. Notice how distant your anxieties, your fears, even your joy, your pride, are all distant now, far away. That for most of our life, we are filled with emotions. They swirl through us, wreaking havoc on our mind, on our behaviors, on our relationships. That we try really hard to block out the torrent of what we feel. We numb ourselves with videos, shows, games, drugs, all to deal with these little things we call emotions. You don't need to do any of those things. Do this practice. Focus on the navel. Breathe into it and chant Ram. Or listen to Ram. Or repeat it silently in your head during the practice. All 3 are okay. Each one is suited to a different cognitive temperament. Do you like to chant? Or do you like to listen? And now give thanks. Give thanks to yourself for participating in the practice, for the universe for giving you this opportunity. And recognize that it's time to return to your regular life. Go ahead and open your eyes. So I've missed meditation. I've missed meditating with you guys. Now I don't want to return. Well, then you're doing it right. So let me explain to y'all. For those of you that don't want to return to life after meditation, now you understand the point. So when you don't want to return, you should continue to practice. Go ahead and return, and then practice tomorrow, and practice the next day. And each time you'll return, each time it'll be a trauma. And practice and practice and practice. And then one day something magical will happen. When you return to life, you'll bring the meditation with you. And then even though you're living life, you will be in that space of meditation. And that is the foundation of enlightenment. To be in that space as you live life. You'll begin to realize that that's actually the most natural way to live life. You've forgotten how to do it. So return. And one day when you return, you're going to bring back a souvenir. And that's the day your life will change. So, who are we rating, chat? Who can handle the current attitude that chat is in? I see someone wanting to raid KZ Fru. Carson? S-Fand? Thank you very much, Diaspectra, for the gifted subs. Much appreciated. Okay, we can raid Carson. It's Call Me Carson, right? No, what's his name? What's the actual thing? Call Me Carson Live. Nope. He's not live, dude. Carson's not live, dude. Okay, S-Fand? Steel_TV. Okay, let's raid Steel_TV. Okay. Thanks for the raid suggestions, y'all. I don't know if we're going to see you guys for the rest of the week. I swear if we have an opportunity to stream, we're going to. But send Steel TV some love. He's a psychotic man-child, screeches obscenities at kids who are just trying their best. Sounds like the perfect follow-up to a healthy gamer stream. So take care, y'all. We'll probably see you guys next week. And if we get the chance, I'll pop in and stream midweek, but probably not. So take care.